Chapter 609. Letting people stay on Yujing Mountain for 5 days, and then send them to Cloud Peak for 5 days. The difference in duration was more likely to stimulate these foundational disciples to move up. Even if Lin Feng used a formation to gather the spiritual energy near the Kunlun mountain range, and improve the environment here to a certain extent, compared to a super-blessed land like Mount Yujing, there was still a huge difference. It was a bit exaggerated to say that the difference was like heaven and earth, but after experiencing the abundant spirit qi on Yujing Mountain, and going to Cloud Peak, the difference was huge. Soon, the foundational disciples were like bulls that had seen a red cloth. All of them rubbed their palms together, waiting for the upcoming test to become a true disciple. In the past few days, Lin Feng and his disciples were not idle. Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, and the others were all making their own preparations. Just like the last time, the test was divided into 2 rounds. Lin Feng first went through a round of screening, and the disciples who passed had a chance to choose their own master. Then Xiao Yan and the others had to choose their own disciples for a second round of individualized tests. The difference was that the people who passed Lin Feng's test this time, if they were rejected by the master they chose, they would not be returned. Instead, Lin Feng would make the decision and randomly assign them to someone else. Lin Feng was also making preparations, but it had nothing to do with the test. Instead, he was improving the hardware facilities of his own sect. Although Cloud Mirror City was newly built and seemed desolate, some disciples had already taken the initiative to move their family members. Under the leadership of Dao Jiqiang, through the space matrix between Cloud Mirror City and Sand Continent City, it had already begun to proceed in an orderly manner. At the same time, Lin Feng had already instructed Dao Jiqiang to select reliable people and expand the lineup of outer sect stewards, mainly to handle mundane chores and do logistical work. Between Cloud Mirror City and Cloud Peak, there was a mirror lake. There was a ferry by the lake, and at the foot of Cloud Peak, Lin Feng had set up the mana restriction of the Purple Qi Stairs. This was the restriction outside West Hill City to test people's hearts, and it served as the mountain gate. Yujing Mountain would remain hidden in the void most of the time in the future. The Cloud Peak would be equivalent to Xianmen Tianzong's front for the outside world. There were also scattered disciples who came to learn from him, and they would all be transported over through the Sand Continent City's spirit formation, and then undergo the test of the Purple Qi Stairs. Those who could pass, and those with outstanding talent, would have the opportunity to become a foundation disciple. Speaking of which, the Sand Continent City also needed a capable person to hold the fort. Cloud Mirror City and Cloud Peak City both needed someone to take care of them. This was really difficult for Dao Jiqiang. Fortunately, Dao Jiqiang was indeed capable and experienced. After getting Lin Feng's approval, he had already started to make preparations. He had already found some useful talents, and after a proper test, they were put to good use. Lin Feng had moved mountains and created lakes, and built a city from flat ground. Admittedly, it was a big move and very impressive. But for his will and ideas to be turned into actual operations, he needed the ability of Dao Jiqiang and his subordinates. There were specializations in every field, and IQ was not the same as EQ. Having a high talent in Taoist techniques did not mean that one was capable of doing things. Lin Feng saw this very clearly, so he had made early preparations, and now they were all put to good use. The foot of Yujing Mountain gradually went on the right track. On Yujing Mountain, Lin Feng himself began a new round of construction. The first place to work was the Herb Valley. After being cultivated by the Tianji spirit soil, the herb fields in the Herb Valley were extremely fertile, and the effects of nurturing and breeding spiritual herbs were very good. But spiritual herbs had different habits. After all, not all spiritual herbs were suitable for growing in the same environment. Unless they used the Tianji spirit soil all the time, that could satisfy all the needs of spiritual herbs, and they would not reject anything. But many times, using the Tianji doll was like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. It was completely possible to use a more cost-effective method to deal with it. For example, after the Herb Valley was expanded, it was divided into different areas, and then each area was transformed into different environments and landforms. For example, the snow lotus grew in an extremely cold environment with snow falling all year round, and the 9 grass grew in an environment with more yin and less yang. Some spiritual herbs only appeared in specific seasons, and when they were not in this season, they would hibernate underground to absorb spiritual qi. There were also some special spiritual herbs that lived in the desert and on the cliffs, and some spiritual herbs only grew best in the bottom of the water. Lin Feng took the lead, and Yang Qing helped from the side. The two of them redivided the herb valley into different areas, and then created different environments such as hills, dangerous peaks, snowy valleys, dark caves, and ponds. Then, they divided the various spiritual herbs in the herb valley into different types and transplanted them to the areas that were most suitable for their growth and reproduction. After dealing with the problems in the herb valley, Lin Feng turned to look at Yang Qing and said with a smile, "Little Qingzi, get ready. Those who pass the assessment this time might come to your side to be the cold stove." Yang Qing's expression was still calm and he nodded. "Disciple will try my best. It's just that after this matter, Disciple wants to try to form his gold core, and in the near future, I'm afraid I'll delay the true disciple under my tutelage." Lin Feng said with a smile, "No matter, when the time comes, I'll let Xiaoyi and the others help you take care of it." After he told Yang Qing about the method Kong Nanhua used to try to break through the difficulty of life and death on the eve of his gold core formation, the young man really clenched his teeth and ran to try it. He sealed his magic power and cultivation level, and went to play all kinds of dangerous actions that, in Lin Feng's opinion, were extreme sports and above, but he wasn't completely courting death yet. Of course, with Lin Feng watching over him, it was impossible to really let Yang Qing play himself to death, but the danger involved was really no less than fighting to the death with a cultivator who was stronger than him. There might not necessarily be a return when there was effort, but it didn't mean there was no return either. Countless times of tempering gave Yang Qing a lot more courage when facing the problem of life and death. However, the problem of his willpower still existed. Not fearing death was a manifestation of high willpower, but not fearing death was not the same as having high willpower. Fortunately, it shouldn't be a big problem for him to challenge the gold core formation. For Yang Qing, if his state of mind grew, it would be much easier for him to improve his Tao. After encouraging Yang Qing a few more words, Lin Feng left the medicine valley, thinking as he walked. Generally speaking, the internal facilities and departments of power in a sect could be divided into 4 major categories: positive evidence, culture and education, law and morality, and creation. Positive evidence was in charge of the teaching, sorting, and creation of martial arts and spells, excavating the disciples' talent in fights of magical powers, presiding over the collection of information from all sides, and the related defense work of the sect. Culture and education was in charge of the research, annotation, and deduction of the Taoist scriptures. They guided the disciples in their cultivation and comprehension, organized the sect's literature, tackled academic problems, and so on. Law and morality was in charge of maintaining the sect's rules and regulations, supervising the disciples' conduct, evaluating their merits and demerits, giving suggestions for rewards and punishments, and participating in the sect's daily affairs, etiquette, and other administrative management. Creation was in charge of the customization and management of medicinal pills, magic tools, talismans, defensive equipment, and clothing. This kind of classification was popular in many sects, with specialized personnel in charge of the system, detailed division of labor, clear standards, and efficient and concise. It was just that the disciples who came out of this kind of environment were like the students in the schools on Earth in Lin Feng's previous life. Although it was efficient, it was more suitable for a large-scale universal education, and not suitable for elite education. Although the master led the way in the path of cultivation, the cultivation depended on the individual, but it was not a lie to say that a great master produces a great disciple. The master's careful cultivation and guidance of the disciple was often not just a few simple lectures. It was to carry out a deep understanding of the disciple, tailor a cultivation plan for the disciple, and put it into practice, constantly monitoring to ensure that the disciple did not deviate from the track, or if there was a sudden change, the master could adjust in time, and not go down the dark path. Of course, the master was not a babysitter, but the effort that the master put into a disciple who passed on his mantle was definitely huge. Taking Lin Feng as an example, he taught Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, Zhu Yi and other direct disciples. Although he only taught them the Book of Heaven and Tao, and then encouraged them to comprehend the Tao on their own, the effort that he spent on each of them in other aspects was not little. This kind of pouring of effort, 3 or 2 could be done, and 8 or 10 could barely do it. Any more, and they would not be able to bear it. No one had that much energy. If there were hundreds, or even thousands, they would not be able to take care of them even if they were exhausted to death. Therefore, Lin Feng decided to adopt the disciple assessment system that he was currently adopting. The policy was to adopt the universal education method for the foundation disciples, and then adopt the elite education method for the true disciples. The 4 aspects of demonstration, culture and education, law and morality and creation, were arranged by Lin Feng to the 4 people, Shi Tianhao, Wang Lin, Zhu Yi and Xiao Yan respectively. Yu Hongyan assisted Shi Tianhao, and Yang Qing assisted Xiao Yan. The few of them played the role of a general manager. For now they were temporarily in charge. As their true disciples grew up in the future, these things would inevitably be handed over. After all, although the organization was stationed on Yujing Mountain, the target group was actually the disciples on Yinfeng Peak. For these 4 major categories, there were still many aspects that needed to be supplemented. The demonstration aspect needed the martial arts arena and the trial ground. The culture and education aspect needed to accelerate time cultivation. In the Xiantian time cave, the spiritual energy at a time was limited, and it could not accommodate too many people. Moreover, it was not worth it to use 100 times acceleration on ordinary disciples. What needed to be supplemented was the kind of accelerated time cave that could accelerate 3 to 5 times, but had a large enough capacity to facilitate the cultivation of a large number of disciples. This was difficult, but it was not necessary. But if it was, it would definitely benefit the development of the sect. There was no shortage of law and morality, but the various sect rules needed to be perfected as soon as possible. Lin Feng himself had set up simple big commandments. Later, Zhu Yi took over in this aspect and formulated many derivative-related small commandments. It would be fine as long as it continued to be perfected. The place for law enforcement, execution, detention, and punishment was not in a hurry at the moment, but it should be put forward. In terms of creation, the equipment refining pavilions Lin Feng had already taken out the construction token from the system, and the remaining talisman making could also be considered. Talisman was very useful in fights between low-level cultivators, and it could even be used as a trump card to protect oneself. Actually, it's not in a hurry. Lin Feng shook his head and laughed. Even if they were all built, to make these things operate in an organized system, we still need manpower. At least a few generations of disciples will have to grow up before these departments can be fully operated. But the framework can be set up first. When the time comes, there will be laws to rely on, and success will come naturally. Lin Feng pondered and smiled leisurely. A lofty building is built from the ground up. 5 days passed quickly, and the assessment of the foundational disciples was about to begin. Lin Feng's divine sense swept across the people on the cloud peak below, and finally his attention stopped on Luo Qinggu and Li Yuanfang. Come on, little friends. Whether it's a mule or a horse, let's take a walk. Chapter 6:10. The day of the test was approaching. The sun had just risen from the horizon, and revealed a faint light. Lin Feng used his mana and purple gas broke through the void, and landed on the peak of Kunlun Mountain in the boundless world. A group of foundational disciples was already waiting there. Silently, they watched the purple gas fall and condense into a purple crystal-like pagoda. The pagoda sat on the empty ground at the top of the mountain. It was as tall as the clouds and seemed to connect to the void. Lin Feng's voice rang in the sky. Those who are interested in participating in the test can enter this pagoda and climb up on their own. In one day, before sunrise tomorrow morning, those who can reach the top of the pagoda and climb up Yujing Mountain will pass the test and become a true disciple of our sect. Everyone looked at the purple pagoda that looked like a road to heaven and gasped. It's that high. The void beside them broke open, and Zhu Yi's figure appeared. He glanced at the slightly restless crowd, and everyone immediately quieted down. The test is to test your potential, not your current cultivation level. The pagoda was built by the ancestors' mana. Everyone who enters will have their cultivation level suppressed to the level of an ordinary person. Even so, those who have cultivated before will naturally have an easier time. So whether or not you want to participate in the test is completely up to your own choice. Someone walked out of the crowd and bowed to Zhu Yi. Elder Zhu, forgive me for being presumptuous. This pagoda is so high that I'm afraid even foundational cultivators can't climb to the top in one day. Zhu Yi said calmly. You don't have to worry about that. The space inside the pagoda is special. It's different from what you see outside the pagoda. Those who are skilled can easily climb up. Everyone nodded slowly, but some people were sneaking glances at Dao Yuding. There were no walls in the world that didn't have ears. The news that Dao Yuding and Dao Jiqiang were father and daughter had spread from 1 to 10, and from 10 to 100. Many people knew about it. I wonder if she went through the back door? A lot of people were muttering in their hearts. Originally, Dao Yuding's cultivation level was in the late stage of the foundation building realm, and all of them combined couldn't compare to her. Now that she was also participating in the assessment, many people's hearts were beating like drums. Hearing that everyone's cultivation would be suppressed to the level of an ordinary person, everyone could not help but heave a sigh of relief. But then they began to worry that Dao Jiqiang would leak the question to his daughter. Even if Dao Jiqiang didn't know the secret of the purple pagoda, Zhu Yi, Xiaoyan, and the others would definitely know. Since they were so familiar with it, who knew if they would take care of Dao Yuding? Or perhaps the faction gave special treatment to Dao Yuding on account of Dao Jiqiang's hard work. She didn't need any explicit help. As long as she gave some pointers, Dao Yuding would have the upper hand. However, these thoughts were buried in the bottom of their hearts. No one was stupid enough to show it. At the moment, Dao Jiqiang was the head supervisor of the outer sanctum. In reality, he had quite a lot of power. Even true disciples like Su Yunsheng and the others couldn't easily offend him. They were not afraid of Dao Jiqiang's revenge, but who knew if they would ask him for help? Moreover, not mentioning Dao Jiqiang, Dao Yuding's cultivation level was also very high. Zhu Yi glanced at them indifferently. He took in everyone's gazes and actions, but he didn't pay much attention to them. This was already within his expectations. Having personally experienced the Wilderness Sea Assembly, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Yu Hongyan, and the others all agreed that Dao Yuding was a real genius. Time would prove everything. How could Dao Yuding not notice the strange gazes of others? It was just that she had a cold personality. Although she recovered her memory and reunited with Dao Jiqiang and his daughter, which made her more cheerful, she still tended to be quiet when she was with most people. Her thinking was also very simple. Words were always pale, and facts spoke louder than words. Not to mention that she was confident in herself. Her father, Dao Jiqiang, really didn't give her any backdoor. This experienced head supervisor of the outer sanctum was very clear about what should be done, and what should not be done. At this moment, Lin Feng's voice sounded in the sky again. Those who can reach the top of the pagoda and ascend Yujing Mountain before midnight today can be my direct disciple. His voice was very calm, but it instantly set off a huge wave. On the top of the cloud peak, even with Zhu Yi by his side, he couldn't suppress the excitement of a group of foundational disciples. The group of young people were so excited that their eyes turned red. Becoming Lin Feng's direct disciple meant that they would be ranked behind Xiao Yan and the others. Receiving personal education and guidance from Lin Feng was like reaching the sky in one step. Looking at the human cultivation world in the Divine Land, who didn't know that Lin Feng was one of the top figures in the entire Divine Land? Even the current temple master of Taishu Temple, Yan Nanlai, and the current sect master of Mount Shu Sword Sect, Xian Longsheng, were not as famous as him. Becoming Lin Feng's direct disciple meant that one's status in the entire Xianmen Tianzong would be very different. Naturally, the resources one could enjoy would be different as well. Moreover, the entire Great Heaven primordial world recognized that Lin Feng's direct disciples were all monstrous geniuses. Anyone who could be accepted as a direct disciple by Lin Feng would definitely be a genius among geniuses. There was no exception. Those who dared to question this had long been slapped swollen by Xiao Yan, Wang Lin, and the others, to the point that even their parents wouldn't be able to recognize them. Reaching the sky in one step, truly reaching the sky in one step. As soon as these words came out, not to mention these foundational disciples, even the few true disciples on Yujing Mountain trembled. Su Yunsheng, Lu Xiaofeng, Li Xingfei, and Xiaohuan were still fine, but Ying Luojia's eyes immediately lit up. Little fatty Yan Wuwei was also a little dazed. Next to them, Xiaoyan turned his head and looked at them with a smile that was not a smile. He teased, "Oh, what's wrong? Are you all tempted? Do you want to get rid of your master and climb up to someone else?" Yan Wuwei's fat body trembled and he hurriedly said, "How could that be? Master, a master for a day is a father for life. How could disciple have such rebellious thoughts?" He paused, then said seriously, "Moreover, when we first took the test, the ancestor once said that anyone who performed well could become his direct disciple. It's just that none of us met the requirements." Yan Wuwei laughed bitterly. "Especially this disciple. Among those who passed the purple chi maze, I was the one at the bottom. I only managed to pass the test by relying on luck. Later on, Master took me in as your disciple, which is why I have the status of a true disciple today. How could I dare to ask for more?" At the side, Ing Rosa said straightforwardly, "Eldest martial uncle, please understand. Back then, disciple indeed hoped to become a true disciple of the ancestor, but since I'm not capable enough, there's nothing to complain about. Now that I'm under Master's tutelage, it's also very good. But disciple would like to ask, is this purple pagoda in front of us the same as the purple chi maze that we took the test in? Is the difficulty the same?" Xiaoyan did not take offense to his question, saying indifferently, "This pagoda is different from the maze back then, but it is also a comprehensive examination of all aspects. If I really had to say, the difficulty is probably a bit higher." He chuckled. "If you're interested, the few of you can also go in and give it a try." With that said, not only Ying Rosa, but Lu Xiaofeng and Xiaohuan also looked eager to try. They did not necessarily want to compete, but mostly just wanted to test themselves. Yan Wuwei was a little hesitant. If they also entered the purple pagoda, it would be fine if their results were good, but if they did not, it would be a little embarrassing. Moreover, if they could not reach the top of the pagoda before sunrise tomorrow morning, and did not meet the standards of a true disciple, it would be too embarrassing. Lu Xiaofeng seemed to know what he was thinking. He turned to look at him and shook his head slightly. Yan Wuwei was shocked. He had not even tried, but he had already lost confidence. This kind of state of mind was not desirable. Li Xingfei looked at the purple pagoda silently and said, "Disciple also wants to give it a try. It's a test set by the ancestor himself. It's a rare experience to experience more. Even if I suffer setbacks, I'll still gain something." Xiaoyan smiled. "If that's the case, then all of you can go too." At this moment, a group of foundational disciples had already entered the purple pagoda at the top of the cloud peak. Not only were there chi refinement disciples, but there were also many people with poor foundations. Anyway, everyone's cultivation would be suppressed to the level of ordinary people. They were all carrying one head on their shoulders, so who was afraid of who? Although Zhu Yi had already explained that even if their cultivation was suppressed, those who had cultivated before would have an advantage, many people still entered the purple pagoda. Whether it was Lin Feng, Zhu Yi, or the others, they would not think that they did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. It was not a bad thing to be enterprising and daring to try. Those who were opportunistic and took advantage of the situation would naturally be taught a lesson. As soon as everyone entered the purple pagoda, those who had cultivated before immediately realized that their cultivation had been completely lost. Li Yuanfang and Dao Yuding, who were at the foundation establishment stage, felt the same. They only felt that they had become ordinary people, and the Taoist foundation in their bodies seemed to have disappeared. Even the strength of their divine senses and the vitality of their souls were suppressed to the level before they learned Taoist techniques. It was not a bit more or less, and it was very detailed. At the same time, abundant spiritual qi surrounded them like an ocean, drowning them. Such abundant spiritual qi was even denser than the natural state of Jade Capital Mountain. Li Yuanfang stood still. After sensing carefully, he came to a conclusion. Everything is as bad as falling short. If the concentration of spiritual qi is too high, ordinary people's bodies will not be able to withstand it. It will cause great pressure and burden. We must rely on ourselves to convert it in time. Otherwise, it will be like falling into a muddy swamp, and we will not be able to move an inch. Luo Qinggu, Dao Yuding, Zhuge Wanqiu, and the others also came to the same conclusion. This is a test of our innate bone structure and physical quality. At this time, the better the bone structure, the faster the body can convert spiritual qi, and thus advance faster. Before entering, Zhu Yi had explained the way of neutralizing qi to everyone. Therefore, everyone began to work hard and tried to advance. Soon they realized that the higher they went, the higher the concentration of spiritual qi. At this time, the quality of one's physical quality became more and more important. The stronger one's physical quality was, the stronger one's resistance to pressure would be, and it would be easier to advance in the rich spiritual qi. As they walked, everyone soon realized that other than the rich spiritual qi, there were other tests waiting for them. Just as Xiaoyan said, the purple pagoda was a comprehensive test for them. Chapter 6:11. In the special environment of the purple pagoda, everyone had to concentrate and dispel the pressure brought by the dense spiritual qi. They could only rely on themselves to move forward, and could not count on others to help them. In just a short while, the gap between everyone gradually became apparent. Luo Qinggu, who had the highest aptitude among the group, walked at the front of everyone. Because of the conflict between Yu Hongyan and Bai Shiqian, Luo Qinggu gradually became known in West Hill City. Many people knew about her top-notch pure yin body after it was exposed. At this moment, seeing that Luo Qinggu even had the energy to look around curiously, most people sighed in their hearts. It's really infuriating to compare yourself with others. The group gradually began to be divided. Luo Qinggu walked at the front, followed closely by Dao Yuding. Her speed was not much slower than Luo Qinggu's, and sometimes she would even surpass Luo Qinggu. Although her aptitude was inferior, Dao Yuding had after all cultivated to the late stage of foundation establishment. Even if her cultivation was suppressed, she still had an advantage. However, as time passed, Luo Qinggu became more and more accustomed to the environment in the pagoda. The innate advantage of the pure yin body became stronger and stronger, and it became easier for her to dispel the pressure of the spiritual qi in the environment. Even Dao Yuding began to be unable to keep up with her. The two women walked at the forefront, and Li Yuanfang and Zhuge Wanqiu followed behind them. They were also a pair of people with slightly higher cultivation bases and slightly stronger innate bones, so their speed was basically the same. Behind them was the majority of the group. There were also slightly more outstanding leaders who followed closely behind Li Yuanfang and Zhuge Wanqiu. On the other hand, Su Yunsheng and the others who entered the pagoda slightly later began to catch up with the others, and even began to overtake them. Su Yunsheng, Ying Luozha and Zhao Huan, who was also known as Xiao Huan, were the three who were chasing the fastest. Li Xingfei, Lu Xiaofeng, and Yan Wuwei were also not slow and followed closely behind. Seeing them come in, the group of foundation disciples revealed surprised expressions. Some of the first batch of disciples to join the sect and were familiar with them hurriedly asked, "Why are you guys here too?" Yan Wuwei waved his hand at them and said, "This is a test set by the patriarch, and it's a rare opportunity. We're only here to verify our cultivation, and it won't affect the final result. Even if we only use 2 hours to reach the top of the pagoda, it's the same as arriving tomorrow morning." As the group moved forward, layers upon layers of tests began one after another. In the air, rays of golden light fell one after another, hitting the people who were climbing. This treasure light directly penetrated their bodies and bombarded their souls. It was to test the strength and toughness of their souls. The excessively dense spiritual qi was used to examine the aptitude of the fleshly body, and these precious lights were used to examine the aptitude of the divine soul. They were both important embodiments of one's root bone. The treasure light wasn't very strong, and it was impossible for it to destroy one's soul in an instant. However, it wasn't an easy hurdle to pass, especially when the treasure light bombarded one after another. It was like an endless sea wave. The suppression of spiritual qi and the bombardment of the treasure light were carried out at the same time. The difficulty of the test was instantly raised by more than one level. and the disciples had to be even more careful. This was just the beginning. Closely after, the third test also appeared. The staircase in front of the crowd began to diverge, and it was no longer a single path to the end. There was only one correct path among the diverging paths. And the disciples participating in the test had to eliminate the interferences and find the correct path among them. This was a test of the disciples' perception and sensitivity to the fluctuations of spiritual qi. It corresponded to the process of cultivation. The stronger and more sensitive one's perception, the easier it would be for them to absorb the spiritual qi from outside their bodies into their bodies for cultivation. However, dispelling the dense spiritual qi suppression while resisting the attacks of the treasure light, and still being able to calm down to find the correct path was no longer a test of one's root bone. It was also a test of one's willpower. Only those with strong willpower, high stability, and calmness could quickly find the correct path under such adverse circumstances. Every fork in the road had Lin Feng's mana restriction. Once they came here, even if they were holding hands and supporting each other, they would instantly fall into a situation of being alone. At this time, they could only rely on themselves to choose the path. Amidst the swirling fog of light, the latecomers could not see which path the people in front had chosen. The difficulty of the test kept increasing, and the division of the team became more and more obvious. The queue grew longer and longer, and as time passed, people even began to gradually fall behind. On Jade Capital Mountain, Xiao Yan and the others were standing in the Hall of All Heavens. Lin Feng was also sitting on the main seat. Everyone looked at the scene in the light together. The pictures flashed quickly, showing the situation of one disciple after another. What will happen if we are thrown in? Xiao Yan asked with a smile, and the people around him also smiled. Zhu Yi was the first to speak. So far, the main thing is to carefully test one's root bone. When Master was outside West Hill City, and now the purple cheese stairs that are left under the cloud peak as the mountain gate, they only set a standard for the test of aptitude. Now it is a comprehensive and thorough test. Shi Tianhao said with a smile. These are just the basics. The next step is to broaden their horizons. Am I right, Master? Lin Feng smiled without saying a word. At this moment, the scene in the light suddenly changed. The disciples who were in the process of climbing all looked confused. Only a few people, such as Li Yuanfang, frowned, but their eyes were still clear. On the basis of the previous test, the 7 emotions and 6 desires transformation was added. The 7 emotions and 6 desires transformation was used as a weapon to silently sneak into one's mind, break one's defenses and confuse one's soul, making it difficult for one to extricate themselves from the illusion. On the purple chi stairs outside West Hill City, Lin Feng mainly sifted the sand, so he simply shook the souls and dug out the evil spirits in the hearts of the tested. The current illusion was of a higher level and richer. It didn't necessarily trigger only the dark side of people's hearts. It could also trigger many positive emotions, such as longing for one's family, love for one's lover, pursuit of one's ideals, and so on. This test used the 7 emotions and 6 desires as weapons to silently sneak into people's minds, break their defenses, and confuse their souls, making it difficult for them to extricate themselves from the illusion. The 7 emotions and 6 desires were human nature. With the cultivations of the disciples in the tower, no one could completely cut off the 7 emotions and 6 desires, so this method was almost unsolvable. Relatively speaking, people with a strong soul and a firm will were less likely to be moved by external things. They could see through the truth and avoid being invaded by external illusions. This trial was a test of the disciples' temperament and willpower. The years of cultivation were endless, and all kinds of chaotic thoughts, whether positive or negative, could become obstacles and difficulties in cultivation. Only those with strong willpower could walk on this path for a long time. The threshold of Xianmen Tianzong was not low. It could even be said to be very high. Those who could be accepted by Xianmen Tianzong could be called talents with potential. But the people who participated in the test were generally only 15 or 16 years old, or even younger. This was the age of youth. How many people could maintain their unwavering will and not be moved by external things and external demons? So on the way up, the overall speed of the team became slower and slower. Illusions appeared before everyone's eyes. Although they kept telling themselves that this was a test for them, and that it was a fake illusion, they still could not stop their hearts from shaking. Some fell into the Azura killing field and became fearful. Some fell into the heavenly paradise and wholeheartedly enjoyed the wonder of immortality. And some fell into the human world, hugging women left and right, unaware of the passage of time. All of these seemed to be illusions, but they were actually transformed from the bottom of the hearts of the people being tested. Therefore, the 6 senses of color, sound, taste, and touch were all present. For the people being tested, it was an incomparably real world. This test was mysterious and unpredictable, instantly making most of the people fall into the changes of the 7 emotions and 6 desires, unable to extricate themselves. The light and shadows in the all heaven's great hall changed like a lantern. It was no longer just showing the real scene, but the illusions in the hearts of the people being tested were also appearing one after another. The scene suddenly stopped. Xiao Yan and the others stared at the scene and shook their heads slightly. This person probably knew that he would be seen through, but in order to avoid suspicion of a guilty conscience, he still participated in the test. However, it's not good to be lucky. If you dare to come in, you will definitely be exposed. Although you have already been exposed long ago. Lin Feng had already told them about the first batch of disciples mixing in the sand. As for the specific target, they all knew in their hearts. However, when they saw it now, they still felt that it was a pity. After all, he was one of the rare talents among the second-generation disciples. Master, if this person can be seen through, then why does the other person seem to have no movement at all? Shi Tianhao turned his head and asked curiously. Lin Feng smiled slightly. The Taishu Temple is more brilliant than the Great Zhou dynasty. The spy they planted probably doesn't even know the task he is shouldering. Right now, he has not been activated, but there must be a way to control him. When the time comes, he can be activated at the crucial moment. Lin Feng smiled. However, with some clues, we can still see through this person's background. Don't worry, you all just need to know. Shi Tianhao asked, during the second opening of the mountain gate to recruit disciples. Will there also be this kind of hidden spy that even the person himself doesn't know about? Lin Feng smiled. Yes, but when we were outside West Hill City, I have already removed it. For this kind of sand, it is enough to leave 1 or 2 to facilitate one's own operation. If there are too many, it will be troublesome enough. Shi Tianhao and the others all nodded and no longer spoke. Their attention returned to the assessment. After the test of triggering illusions that targeted the 7 emotions and 6 sensory pleasures was launched, the impact on the disciples participating in the assessment was very obvious. Most people began to walk with difficulty. While fighting against the illusions, they struggled to move forward. In the leading group, Luo Qinggu, who had always been the vanguard, gradually slowed down. The others were also more or less affected. Only Li Yuanfang's speed remained stable. Under the situation where the speed of the others gradually slowed down, it was obvious that Li Yuanfang's speed had increased. First, Zhuge Wanqiu fell further and further behind him. Then, even Dao Yuding was almost caught up by him. The few of them were also affected by the illusions. All kinds of illusions kept appearing in their minds. Chapter 6:12. Lin Feng observed the leading group with interest, and saw that they were also troubled by endless illusions. Daddy, Mommy, Sixth Grandpa, and Grandpa, Great-Grandpa. The scenes that emerged in the mind of the little lowly Luo Qinggu were rather chaotic. One moment, she was surrounded by many loved ones, and everyone loved and doted on her. The next moment, everyone was coldly leaving her. No matter how she called out to them, they ignored her. These images alternated, intertwined with some of the treasures that had grown up with her. The surprise of regaining what she had lost, and the sadness of losing what she had gained. The next moment, the images changed again. First, she failed to become a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong, and her heart only felt cold and desperate. Then, she successfully passed the ongoing assessment, and cheered on Yujing Mountain. The little girl bit her lip and moved forward step by step. She was still young and her temperament had not been determined. She was lively and active, and usually liked to let her imagination run wild, so it was easy for her to be troubled by illusions. Fortunately, her mental potential was not low. She had a stubborn and resolute temperament, so she could stick to her heart and control herself. In addition, her bone talent was really outstanding, so she did not have to worry too much about the bone talent test. This allowed her to focus more energy on calming her mind and fighting against the illusions. On the other hand, Li Yuanfang was just the opposite. He had a firm will and rarely had illusions. They only happened occasionally. Sometimes the top formations such as the Yin and Yang life and death formation, the Vairocana formation, the Supreme Void Yin and Yang formation, and the Great Immortal Nature Sword formation were placed in front of him, allowing him to study them. Sometimes his first teacher, ancestor He too, actually appeared in front of him, as if he had just gone on a long trip and returned, looking at him with a smile. Other times, Ding Runfeng from Taishu Temple suddenly appeared with a faint smile full of mockery. He said to him word by word, "Aren't you a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong? What are you doing here?" Li Yuanfang was expressionless as he closed his eyes. A second later he opened them again. His eyes were clear and the illusion in his mind had disappeared. He didn't stop and continued forward. Compared to Luo Qinggu, he spent more time on dispelling the spiritual qi and defending against the attacks of the treasured light. Dao Yuding walked up the stairs of the pagoda, dispelling all kinds of restrictions while resisting the erosion of the heart demon's illusions. She had a strong will, but the things she had experienced were much more complicated than others. After being separated from his father, Dao Jiqiang, for so many years, he was finally able to reunite with him. This was a joyous feeling. However, his mother had died in the hands of the Skypon sect cultivators. This was a feeling of grief and indignation. Whether it was happiness or sadness, positive or negative, it would cause illusions to appear and disturb her mind. Sometimes Song Qingyuan's image would suddenly appear. That was the fear in the depths of Dao Yuding's heart. After the destruction of the Skypon sect, she reunited with her father and became Xianmen Tianzong's disciple. This fear had gradually disappeared, but it resurfaced again at this moment. Not long after Dao Yuding was accepted as a disciple of the Skypon sect, she knew that the seemingly gentle and amiable young man was actually cruel and ruthless. He would be her Dao companion in the future, and their natural endowments complemented each other. The Skypon sect's idea was that after Dao Yuding formed her gold core, she could marry Song Qingyuan, and the two of them could cultivate together. However, whenever Dao Yuding thought of Song Qingyuan, she would shudder all over. She was even afraid of forming her gold core, and deliberately avoided it. The great Dao of golden elixir, which ordinary cultivators dreamed of, terrified her. She wasn't afraid of the difficulty of forming her gold core. On the contrary, she was afraid of what she had to face after forming her gold core. Dao Yuding shook her head forcefully. She felt as if she was facing a poisonous snake. The creepy, cold and slippery feeling was forcibly expelled from her mind. She stabilized her state of mind and continued to work hard to climb. Zhuge Wanqiu, who had climbed extremely fast in the early stage and was also in the first echelon, seemed to have fallen behind at this time. She was left far behind by Luo Qinggu, Li Yuanfang and Dao Yuding. Her thoughts and experiences weren't complicated, but she didn't have enough willpower. Even a small thing in her memory could trigger a layer of illusion. When she was young, she caught a few spiritual birds. The little beast she raised died of illness. She was separated from her father, and so on. Because her emotions weren't particularly intense, the illusion was also very ordinary, and the little girl could quickly get rid of it. However, such things kept happening one after another, as if there was no end to it. Fortunately, her foundation was very outstanding, especially the spirituality and sensitivity of her spirit. She almost never hesitated when she encountered a fork in the road, and could immediately find the right direction. That was why she was barely able to stay at the front of the group. After a long period of climbing, Su Yunsheng, Lu Xiaofeng, and the other true disciples had already surpassed the majority of the group. They were also at the front of the group, and were not too far away from Zhuge Wanqiu, who was at the end of the first echelon. They and a few other more outstanding foundation disciples formed the second echelon. As they continued to move forward, they gradually reached the front of the second echelon. Although they were also troubled by the illusion of the heart demon, they continued to climb while resisting the illusion and enduring the bombardment of spiritual qi and treasure light. At this point, everyone's speed was actually very slow. Luo Qinggu, Li Yuanfang, and the others were actually moving forward slowly, step by step. More than half of the group had already completely fallen behind. They were either trapped by the heart demon, or they were distracted by resisting the heart demon, and could not withstand the pressure of spiritual qi and the bombardment of treasure light. However, although most of them had been eliminated, overall, the results of the assessment so far were still satisfactory to Lin Feng. His assessment was not easy to begin with. To put it crudely, he used his purple pagoda that was condensed from mana to test the younger generation of all the sects in the world. Other than Taishu and Shushan, who were slightly better, there were very few descendants from other places who could pass. It was also very normal for the sects to be completely annihilated after the assessment. However, there were also things that happened that made Lin Feng not know whether to laugh or cry. For example, there was a young man on the stairs who was completely crazy and had already lost control. He was actually completely immersed in the illusion of the heart demon and could not break free. Power. With great power, no one will look down on me anymore, ha ha ha. The young man laughed out loud and shouted. He was full of words like he was invincible, he would take all the beauties in the world, and he would kill all those who were not pleasing to his eyes. When Lin Feng heard this, he was speechless. He used mana to cover the young man the moment he went crazy. This way, he would not let the other disciples who were participating in the assessment see him lose his composure, so that everyone would not be embarrassed when he woke up. He took a look at the talent detector. The young man's foundation and power of understanding were not bad. He even had 7 points of luck, which was considered to be low for most people, which was already quite good. The only problem was that his willpower was low. He was born into a poor family and was used to being bullied. As a result, his emotions accumulated to a certain extent, and he was completely detonated by the mana restriction in the purple pagoda. Sigh, there will always be fish that slip through the net. Lin Feng shook his head and began to seriously consider. As the purple chi stares at the foot of the mountain gate, he had to further strengthen the test of temperament. Previously, he only checked for spies, which was a little lacking. It was true that this young man had gone crazy and lost control because he had triggered his inner demons. However, with his state of mind, it was easy for him to be like a wolf in the mountains and become arrogant when he succeeded. However, since he had already been accepted into the sect, Lin Feng could tolerate him. It all depended on whether the teaching was good or not. If it was good enough, he could slowly correct it. Xiao Yi, pay attention to this person. Don't worry too much, but the sect rules must be strictly enforced. Rewards and punishments must be clear. Zhu Yi and the others also looked like they did not know whether to laugh or cry. Zhu Yi listened to Lin Feng's instructions and immediately nodded. Education without discrimination, disciple understands. Shi Tianhao laughed at the side and said, "This young man is really ambitious. It's a pity that he definitely can't pass master's test. Otherwise, I would want to accept him." The others curled their lips together. Everyone had the same expression, expressing the same meaning. If he followed you, he would be completely hopeless. The few of them joked around for a while, but the people in the pagoda still had to continue climbing, facing the pressure of spiritual energy and the bombardment of treasure light. While searching for the path, they also had to resist the layers of illusions caused by the 7 emotions and 6 desires. The group of foundational disciples climbed the stairs in the purple pagoda with difficulty. The endless tests almost left them with no time to think, and they lost the concept of time. All their attention was used to deal with the various mana prohibitions in the pagoda. Time passed quickly, and the sky gradually darkened. For the few people in the lead group, the top of the pagoda was already in sight for them. In the end, it was still Luo Qinggu who was the first to reach the top. The top of the pagoda was a vast space, and a path was in front of her, leading to a shining spell formation. According to Zhu Yi's instructions, stepping on the spell formation would transport them to Jade Capital Mountain, and at the same time, it meant that they had passed the test. However, a white light barrier blocked in front of them, cutting off the path, allowing Luo Qinggu to get close to the spell formation. Hundreds of white streams of light floated around the barrier, looking like hanging silk ribbons. Luo Qinggu stopped, curiously sizing up the barrier and the streams of light. At that moment, footsteps came from behind her, and when she turned back, she saw that it was Li Yuanfang. The two of them basically reached the top of the pagoda one after the other, and Dao Yuding was overtaken by Li Yuanfang. Li Yuanfang also came to the barrier, looking at the floating streams of light with a serious expression. After thinking for a while, he reached out his hand to touch the streams of light. The streams of light did not dissipate, but instead seemed to have a physical form, landing on Li Yuanfang's palm. This is a name. Li Yuanfang looked at the words flashing in the streams of light. It was a name, and he thought for a while, remembering that this was a disciple who was participating in the test. After checking the rest of the light ribbons, sure enough, he saw that each of the ribbons had a person's name on it. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu quickly found the ribbons with their names on them. As soon as their own ribbons were in their hands, they saw another line of words appear behind their names, but it was a simple question. Luo Qinggu softly read, "The end of pure Yin." There were only 4 words on the ribbons, but it seemed that there was more to it. Does it mean that Xiaowu has to find the answer herself? Luo Qinggu stroked the ribbons, thinking in her heart. Beside her, Li Yuanfang was also deep in thought, but his ribbons had a different content. River and Luo Luo intersect. Song Qingyuan's problem was exactly the opposite of hers. This was the solution provided by the Tianqi sect. Whether it was in theory or in practice, it was a reliable solution. The only problem was that they had to cultivate together. Even though Dao Yuding had always been against interacting with Song Qingyuan, and was even afraid of core formation, she had no other choice. But looking at Lin Feng's words, it was clear that there was another way. Dao Yuding immediately began to think seriously. On the other side, Luo Qinggu and Li Yuanfang were also staring at their own problems and thinking hard. After a while, the 4th person arrived. It was Su Yinsheng, one of the true disciples. He nodded at the 3 people who had arrived earlier, and went to look for his own streamer. Even though their assessment did not count, as long as they entered the purple pagoda to participate in the assessment, Lin Feng would have a problem to prepare for. In a sense, this problem was also a great harvest for Su Yinsheng and the others. Lin Feng had personally pointed out the major problems in their cultivation process. Su Yinsheng found his streamer. After seeing the problem clearly, he also began to think. After that, the others also arrived. After Su Yinsheng, Ingroza and Zhuge Wanqiu reached the top of the pagoda almost at the same time. Ingroza looked at Su Yinsheng with a dark expression. He walked to the front of the white barrier. Su Yinsheng looked up at him and said indifferently, "Find the one with your name on the barrier's streamer. There are questions on it for everyone." After hearing this, Ingroza did not say a word and began to search. Zhuge Wanqiu said to Su Yinsheng, "Thank you, senior brother." Su Yinsheng shook his head. "No need to thank me. Hurry up." Zhuge Wanqiu immediately walked to the barrier and looked for the streamer with her name on it. As she was looking, Ingroza suddenly handed one over without raising his head. "It's yours. Take it." "Thank you, senior brother." Zhuge Wanqiu was slightly stunned. She hurriedly thanked him and took the streamer. She saw that there were 4 words after her name on it. Unstable soul. Ingroza did not say anything after that. He searched for a while and found his streamer. After seeing the problem on it, he sat on the ground and frowned slightly. He began to think. After a while, Li Xingfei, Lu Xiaofeng, and another new foundation disciple also reached the top of the pagoda. Not long after them, Zhao Huan and Yin Wuwei also arrived. In the following period of time, the second echelon of people began to reach the top of the pagoda. Everyone split up to look for their streamers, and then began to seriously think about the problem on it. Someone suddenly asked, "What time is it now?" Everyone was stunned. Lu Xiaofeng glanced at him and said indifferently, "Let's solve the problem first. If we can't solve the problem, everything is useless." Everyone nodded and focused their attention on the problem again. The person who just spoke also nodded and hurriedly continued to think about the problem. Time passed bit by bit. On Jade Capital Mountain, Lin Feng and his disciples watched this scene with interest. Shi Tianhao suddenly smiled. I bet that Li Yuanfang will be the first to solve the problem. Who wants to bet with me? Xiaoyan rolled his eyes. Only an idiot would bet with you. They had interacted with Li Yuanfang many times and knew that this person's aptitude could only be considered superior, not top-notch, much less monstrous. But his comprehension is very high. Not only does he practice formations with Lin Feng, he also understands every day when discussing Dao techniques with Xiao Yan and the others, drawing inferences about other things from one instance. In his seriousness, he is full of intelligence. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, then let's bet on whether he can solve the problem before midnight and become Master's personal disciple. Xiao Yan and the others looked at each other and became interested. This bet is finally a little interesting. Calculating the time, there were still 2 hours to midnight. Shi Tianhao immediately said, I bet that he can pass. Yang Qing, who usually interacted with Li Yuanfang the most, also nodded. I also think he can pass. Zhu Yi did not participate in the bet. Yu Hongyan thought about it and said, I also think he can pass. This is not good. I can't afford to bet. Xiaoyan held a grass stem in his mouth and put his hands behind his head. I'm also optimistic about his teeth. Shi Tianhao was a little dumbfounded and quickly looked at Wang Lin. Third senior brother? Wang Lin smiled. I can't afford to bet. The brothers stared at each other for a long time, and all laughed at once. This means that we will have another junior brother. Xiaoyan rubbed his temples and suddenly felt a headache when he thought of Li Yuanfang's character. He smacked his lips and said, this guy is so long-winded. Shi Tianhao's eyes flashed. Xiaoyan glanced at him and laughed unscrupulously. Don't blink. He is older than you. According to what you said at the beginning, after he enters the sect, we will have another junior brother, and you will have another senior brother. You're a man. You have to keep your word. Shi Tianhao stuck out his tongue. At that time, I was not even 4 years old. At best, I could only be considered a little husband. As they laughed and joked, midnight arrived. There was less than an hour left. At this moment, Li Yuanfang, who had his eyes closed and was silent, suddenly opened his eyes. The expression on his dark and thin face did not change, but his eyes were bright. However, he did not get up. Instead, after counting the time with his fingers, he actually closed his eyes again and rested silently. What is he doing? Xiaoyan frowned slightly. Look at him. He has clearly solved the problem. Is he going to climb up the mountain at the last moment? In my impression, he is not someone who likes to play to the gallery. Yang Qing hesitated and said, could it be that he wants to reorganize his thoughts, or think about whether there is more to gain? The others were also puzzled. Only Lin Feng, who had not spoken since the beginning, looked at the image of Li Yuanfang in the light and shadow illusion, and roughly guessed what he was thinking. This young man thought that he had already received too much kindness from Lin Feng. Therefore, he wanted to start from a low position and repay the sect step by step. He did not want to reach the sky in a single step. His way of thinking might seem ridiculous, pretentious, and awkward in the eyes of others, but Li Yuanfang really thought so. He had his own set of standards, and he did not require others to follow him, but he himself would strictly abide by them. Lin Feng shook his head slightly and passed a transcendence energy sound transmission to Li Yuanfang. Discern the inner heart and do not bother about trifles. Different positions have different sceneries. Li Yuanfang was slightly stunned and lowered his head in contemplation. Lin Feng closed his mouth after saying this. It was not that he had to accept Li Yuanfang as a direct disciple, but with Li Yuanfang's character, if he continued to develop in the future, it would be detrimental to his cultivation. Since Li Yuanfang had become Xianmen Tianzong's disciple, even if he was not his direct disciple, Lin Feng would still remind him. However, everyone had their own fate. Whether he listened or not, it was Li Yuanfang's own business. Fortunately, although Li Yuanfang was strict and rigid, and appeared stubborn in many areas, he was reasonable. He could clearly distinguish who was good to him and who was bad to him. Back when he was under Patriarch He Tu's tutelage, Patriarch He Tu corrected his habit of pointing out the mistakes of others. Thus, Li Yuanfang was able to listen to his advice. In the future, as long as others did not take the initiative to find trouble with him, he would rarely be as disrespectful as he was in the beginning. Now that he had listened to Lin Feng's guidance, Li Yuanfang stood up after thinking for a while, and reached out to hold the streamer of light with his name written on it. The answer to the question was transmitted to the streamer through his thoughts. Li Yuanfang pulled hard and the streamer broke. In the next moment, he was already on the other side of the barrier. Everyone else was shocked. They looked at Li Yuanfang with complicated expressions. Someone counted the time with his fingers and said bitterly, "It's not midnight yet." Li Yuanfang let out a long breath. After cupping his fists and bowing to everyone with a solemn expression, he walked towards the formation. In the next moment, he disappeared into the formation, having been teleported to Jade Capital Mountain. All the disciples had complicated expressions. It was not easy for them to calm down and make use of the time to think about their own questions. As time passed, it was getting closer and closer to midnight. Chapter 6:14. The fact that Li Yuanfang took the first step undoubtedly had a great impact on those who were not calm enough. Of course, the impact was not necessarily one-sided. Some people were unsettled and could not concentrate to think about the problem, while some people's fighting spirit was stimulated and could instead be more focused. These performances fell into the eyes of Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, and the others, which gave them a more direct understanding of these disciples' temperaments. Luo Qinggu sat cross-legged with her hands supporting her chin. Looking at Li Yuanfang's back as he left, she calmed down and began to think again. Dao Yuding's mentality stabilized faster, and she carefully pondered over the question that Lin Feng had set. For example, Tianqi sect might have other solutions for her problem, but letting her and Song Qingyuan complement each other was undoubtedly the most convenient and beneficial method. It was killing two birds with one stone. While solving the problem, if they didn't consider their personal feelings, it was indeed the most beneficial for their cultivation. However, there were many experts in Tianqi sect. The problems that they could think of did not mean that a foundation-building cultivator, like Dao Yuding, could figure them out in a short period of time. When I was climbing in the pagoda just now, the spiritual aura that oppressed me and the treasure light that attacked me seemed to be strange. Dao Yuding thought for a moment, and an idea flashed in her mind. Could it be that the spiritual aura pressure and the treasure light attack actually contained hidden guidance? She suddenly realized that the test that she had received when climbing up the pagoda just now was not just a test. At the same time, there were some hidden rules that seemed to be some kind of guidance. She could vaguely find clues from the question that she was thinking about now. Dao Yuding suddenly understood. The current question could be sought, or rather summarized, the answer from the previous test. At this time, she needed to carefully recall and comprehend the feeling that she had in the pagoda just now. This kind of comprehension was not a direct answer, and she needed to transform and summarize it herself. At the same time that Dao Yuding discovered this, Luo Qinggu also reacted. She began to carefully recall her specific feelings, and the changes in her body and soul when she was facing the pressure of spiritual energy, and the bombardment of the precious light when she was climbing. Then, she kept exploring and summarizing. After a long time, the little girl's eyes lit up. She stood up from the ground and grabbed the streamer with her name written on it. With a pull, she instantly went to the other side of the barrier. Luo Qinggu also learned from Li Yuanfang. She solemnly bowed to the other sect members on the other side of the barrier, then turned and walked towards the spell formation. As she walked, she exclaimed in her heart, "Everyone's topic should be different." Previously, in the tower, the magic power restriction targeted different people and gave different hints at the same time. While there are hundreds of people, Ancestral Master is so powerful. It was just as Luo Qinggu was. This was also what Li Yuanfang comprehended just now. The test in the pagoda for them was actually mysterious. For the sake of fairness, the spiritual aura pressure and the treasure light intensity that everyone had to endure were the same. However, during this process, Lin Feng had gradually figured out their respective problems. Everyone followed the method taught by Zhu Yi to dispel the spiritual aura and resist the treasure light. Although the method was the same, everyone had different qualifications and different ways of using the method. This gradually revealed the problems that existed or might exist in their cultivation. Even those who had not cultivated qi at all previously had the same principle. As time passed, after figuring out everyone's problems, the spiritual aura pressure and the treasure light attack continued. Lin Feng secretly passed some pointers into everyone's body without leaving a trace. It was not words, not voices, not words, not consciousness, and not aura. It was just a simple feeling and understanding. After everyone reached the top of the pagoda, the white light screen floated with ribbons of light. Everyone had a question. It was not preset, but it was fresh out of the oven. Not to mention the talent detector, Lin Feng enveloped them with his own divine sense. With a turn, he could know the specific state of everyone's physical body and spirit. However, people were alive and their minds were changeable. It was unknown what problems they would encounter in cultivation. It was difficult to predict in advance. Through this method, Lin Feng clearly figured out everyone's shortcomings and then prescribed the right medicine. The good medicine had been sent to everyone before, so the work of brewing the medicine was left to them. At the same time, it could also test their comprehension. Of course, some people did not need to use this method to test the problems in their cultivation process. For example, Luo Qinggu, Dao Yuding, and the others. After a long period of contact, it was easy to find out. This kind of thing sounded simple, but dealing with more than 200 people at the same time and summarizing their problems at the same time, giving feedback separately, and checking the minute changes in their physical body and spirit, the mental energy consumed was not something ordinary people could bear. It was quite exhausting, but for Lin Feng, it was a piece of cake. After Li Yuanfang, Luo Qinggu finally solved her question. She stepped onto the spirit formation and was transported to Mount Yujing. After someone calculated the time, he said hesitantly, "It should be midnight. I wonder if she has passed." Everyone's thoughts were wandering, and some people's minds were even more restless. After a while, Dao Yuding also stood up. She grabbed the ribbons of light that were subordinate to her, went to the other side of the screen, and walked calmly towards the spirit formation. At this moment, no one said anything. The time now was definitely past midnight. Although it was not by much, it was indeed past time. In fact, the time that Dao Yuding used to think was basically the same as Luo Qinggu's. The time difference between them was actually the time when they reached the top of the pagoda. During the process of climbing the pagoda, Luo Qinggu was one step faster than Dao Yuding, and the time they took to solve the questions was basically the same. However, it was this time difference that allowed the two of them to complete the entire test one after the other. Whether or not Luo Qinggu had counted before midnight remained to be verified. But Dao Yuding was destined to have exceeded the time limit. On Mount Yujing, Shi Tianhao and the others shook their heads. It's a pity for Dao Yuding. She was just short by a little bit, at most 15 minutes. The slightest error can lead to a huge error. 15 minutes is already a very long time, Lin Feng said lightly. It was already past midnight, but the people at the top of the pagoda relaxed quite a bit. Although everyone felt a little regretful, they had completely calmed down and started solving the questions seriously. Time passed slowly. After Dao Yuding, Su Yinsheng, Ing Rosa, and Zhuge Wanqiu stood up together and walked to the white barrier, dropping their respective streamers of light. Then, the three of them were transported to the other side of the barrier. Su Yinsheng and Ing Rosa looked at each other. Slowly, Su Yinsheng shook his head. You win this round. He had reached the top of the pagoda earlier than Ing Rosa and Zhuge Wanqiu, and had started solving the questions earlier. However, in the end they solved the questions together, and the two of them had caught up. Ing Rosa snorted coldly. Don't give me that. One win and one loss, and the result is a tie. I still can't beat you. Zhuge Wanqiu looked at the two youths in front of her with some curiosity. One was arrogant like a wolf on the plains, while the other looked calm and dignified, but was actually as proud as an eagle in the sky. Senior brothers? Zhuge Wanqiu asked timidly. Can we go to the spell formation now? Ing Rosa snorted and did not say anything. He walked towards the spell formation with his head lowered. Su Yinsheng looked at Zhuge Wanqiu and nodded. Let's go. The three of them left the pagoda through the spell formation, and were transported to Mount Yujing. After a while, Li Xingfei stood up and also pulled down her streamer of light, passing the final test. After a while, Lu Xiaofeng, Zhao Huan, Yin Wuwei, and a few other foundational disciples passed the test one after another. Time passed quickly. From time to time, there would be people who solved their questions and finally reached the spell formation, passing through it to ascend Mount Yujing. Suddenly, the purple pagoda shook. Although the white barrier and the streamers of light did not disappear, the spell formation on the other side of the barrier closed. Seeing this, the remaining people sighed dejectedly. This meant that they did not pass the test in the end, and would not be able to become a true disciple. Some people were annoyed. They had already gotten the hang of it, and were doing deductions and summaries. If they were given a little more time, they would be able to solve the questions. However, time waited for no one. The streamers of light on the white barrier suddenly flew down from the barrier, and merged into the corresponding disciples' bodies. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Lin Feng's guidance turned into simple and clear words that appeared in their minds. Most of the streamers of light flew out of the top of the pagoda, and landed in various places in the pagoda, finding their respective owners. Even if they did not reach the top of the pagoda, Lin Feng's guidance would not be lacking for them. Even though they did not pass the examination, but every disciple that participated in the examination did not return empty-handed. Not only did they experience a period of training, they were also able to receive Lin Feng's guidance. For foundation disciples, this kind of opportunity is quite rare. The pagoda turned into a purple cloud and swept everyone up Mount Yujing, landing on the empty space at the top of the mountain. The purple cloud dissipated. Everything in the pagoda seemed to be an illusion. At this moment, everything had disappeared. Those who had been trapped by the mental demons also regained their senses. After understanding the situation, they could not help but feel somewhat dejected. However, they quickly regained their spirits and looked around curiously. Funtian Cliff, Qiantian Palace, Fanlin Residence, Snow Wind Valley, Nirvana Grotto Heaven, and Desolate Heaven Valley. These 6 grotto heavens were now filled with treasure auras and divine light. The disciples who passed the test also walked towards their respective grotto heavens. Now that they were already true disciples, they had the right to choose their own masters. However, they would also have to accept the test from Xiao Yan and the others. Passing the test would mean that their wishes would come true. If they did not pass the test, they would not be returned to Cloud Peak. Instead, they would be randomly assigned to another sect. However, in this way, it would inevitably be somewhat awkward when facing their masters in the future. Therefore, everyone was very careful in their choice. The foundational disciples who did not pass the test looked back and forth on the path to the 6 grotto heavens. They wanted to see how those who had already become true disciples would ultimately choose. Everyone's gaze first landed on a pale-skinned girl. At this moment, their emotions were somewhat complicated. That was Dao Yuding, who had the highest cultivation level among the foundational disciples who participated in the test. She had just entered the sect, and was already in the late stage of the foundational building realm. Unfortunately, she was just a little bit off and lost the opportunity to become Lin Feng's personal disciple. However, Dao Yuding's expression was still rather calm. She was walking towards a grotto heaven unhurriedly. Chapter 6:15. Unexpectedly, the sect that Dao Yuding chose to enter was Wang Lin's Mortal Forest residence. Logically speaking, the two of them had even fought intensely as opponents at the Desolate Sea Assembly. To Wang Lin, who was only at the early stage of foundation establishment, Dao Yuding, who was at the late stage of foundation establishment, was one of the few strong opponents he had in the Desolate Sea Assembly. She had brought him immense pressure, and the outcome of the battle had only been a thin line. Because of the battle with Dao Yuding in the semifinals, even though Wang Lin had won, he had expended too much energy. He had no choice but to forfeit in the finals against Yu Hongyan. This guaranteed that Yu Hongyan would become the champion of the Foundation Establishment Realm competition. However, to Dao Yuding, this was not necessarily a good memory. Losing to an opponent at the early stage of Foundation Establishment, even if it was by a thin line, was not something to be proud of. especially when Dao Yuding was the rising star of the Tianqi sect's younger generation. She was the top genius among the Foundation establishment realm disciples. Not seeing her opponent in the past for a day felt like 3 years. When they met again, she had already reached the Yuanying stage. Anyone would be caught unprepared by such a huge contrast. Dao Yuding's expression was still rather calm, but no one knew what she was thinking. Those who knew about the Desolate Sea Assembly were all muttering in their hearts. Actually, Dao Yuding's current state of mind was rather calm. As she walked on the rainbow-purple cloud bridge to Mortal Forest residence, her father Dao Jiqiang's advice appeared in her mind. Ting, you must remember that if you can become the Patriarch's direct disciple, that would naturally be the best outcome. However, if you can't, you must think carefully about who your master will be. Although the Patriarch has 6 direct disciples, and the 6 of them get along very well, in my opinion, it's best for you to choose between Xiao, Zhu, Wang, or Shi as your master. In Dao Yuding's impression, her father's expression was very solemn when he said this. The founder valued all his personal disciples very much. Basically, he could treat all of them equally. But let's not talk about the fact that Xiao, Zhu, Wang, and Shi have higher cultivation levels. The key is that they entered the sect earlier. These 4 people were all disciples of the Patriarch when he first opened the door to the sect. In other words, if the Patriarch didn't open the door to the sect, he wouldn't have established the foundation of Xianmen Tianzong. They were also the Patriarch's disciples. They were the disciples that the Patriarch took in when he was still a rogue cultivator. So if you want to choose, it would be best for you to choose one of these 4 as your teacher. Dao Jiqiang analyzed in detail. First Elder Xiaoyan is the Patriarch's first disciple. His magic power is profound and his combat ability is extremely outstanding. He is also in charge of the sect's alchemy room. The alchemy supply for his disciples will definitely be more abundant than that of the other grotto heavens. However, he mainly cultivates fire element and martial path abilities. The path of masculinity is not very beneficial for your future growth. Second Elder Zhu Yi is a person with a clear temperament and knows when to advance and when to retreat. He has always been the teacher of the Foundation disciples. At the same time, according to my observation, his ability to teach disciples should be the most outstanding among the 6. Third Elder Wang Lin is the person who fought with you at the Desolate Sea Assembly. He is a person who doesn't make a name for himself, but amazes the world with a single brilliant feat. He is quite strange and unpredictable. However, from my observation, he is decisive and has a strong murderous intent. If you become his disciple, not only will it be awkward because of what happened before, but it may not be beneficial for your development. At this point, Dao Jiqiang paused. His expression was slightly strange. He said, Elder Wang only has 1 disciple now. She is the only female disciple among the first batch of true disciples. Her name is Li Xingfei. Although her cultivation is only at Qi refinement, and is far from yours, she is quite good at dealing with people. She knows etiquette and knows when to advance and when to retreat. If you become the same disciple as her, I'm not worried about your cultivation progress. However, in terms of the way she conducts herself, if she has evil intentions and plots against you, I'm really afraid that you will be at a disadvantage. So if it's possible, it's better for you not to choose Elder Wang. Dao Jiqiang continued. The sect master's youngest disciple, Shi Tianhao, is a young genius with outstanding talent. However, he mainly walks the path of physical martial arts and divine abilities, which is incompatible with your development. If you become his disciple, it will not be beneficial for you to bring out your strengths. In the end, Dao Jiqiang concluded, with my current position, it is not convenient for me to say these things. However, this matter concerns your future development path, so you must be careful. So, I have to say a few more words. You must consider it seriously. In summary, choosing Second Elder Zhu Yi as your master is the most suitable. Dao Jiqiang hesitated for a moment before continuing. Apart from this, it depends on the specific situation. If you want to burn a cold stove, then there is another special choice. Apart from Xiao, Zhu, Wang, and Shi. That is Ancestor's 5th disciple Yang Qing. This person cultivates the Tao of Yin and Yang. In terms of Tao techniques, he is the most compatible with your characteristics. Also, he is in charge of the Medicine Valley, so he does not lack resources. Dao Jiqiang said. The only thing I have to worry about is that his cultivation is the same as yours. Under such a situation, if you become his disciple, it will inevitably be awkward for everyone. However, according to my observations, Elder Yang is a gentle person. I don't think he will hold a grudge against you because of this. Right now, he doesn't have any disciples under him. As long as you become his disciple, you will immediately become the leader of the direct disciples in Nirvana Wonderland. In terms of Tao techniques, it will be much more convenient. Although Elder Yu is a woman, don't consider it. She mainly cultivates martial arts and divine abilities, which is different from yours. Dao Jiqiang said a lot, and Dao Yuding listened attentively. However, she had her own ideas. She didn't choose Zhu Yi or Yang Qing. In the end, she chose Wang Lin's Fanlin house. The opponent of the past had become the person she wanted to become her disciple today. Dao Yuding naturally felt a little awkward, but more than that, she felt a strange feeling. Back then, in the Hidden Dragon Pot, the seemingly ordinary teen who was at the early stage of foundational cultivation fought her, who was at the late stage of foundational cultivation. Facing the shadow of death, neither of them retreated. They weren't afraid at all. I sliced open your neck with a knife, you destroyed my life with a finger. Between life and death, they were fearless and fought head-on to determine who was the winner. That kind of strange feeling made Dao Yuding, whose emotions rarely fluctuate, feel very novel. Even now it was still fresh in her memory. And today, such an opponent had become an existence that she had to completely look up to. Dao Yuding didn't feel embarrassed. That kind of strange feeling continued to grow, and instead it became more indescribable. However, it left a deep impression on her. Actually, Dao Yuding didn't know what kind of feelings she had, but when she needed to choose a master, almost without thinking, she naturally walked towards Fanlin House. At this moment, Dao Jiqiang also arrived at Yujing Mountain. Seeing that his daughter finally chose Fanlin House, he sighed. He was both gratified and disappointed. His daughter had grown up and had her own opinions. He was actually quite happy, but as a father, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Other than Dao Yuding, among this batch of direct disciples who passed the test, there were others who were more eye-catching. For example, Zhuge Wanqiu. She didn't pass the test too late, and was the first to arrive at Yujing Mountain. However, her choice was a little shocking. She actually chose Shirtianhao's desolate Sky Valley. Even Lin Feng couldn't understand this choice for a moment. This girl's talent advantage was that her soul was agile and sensitive. Generally speaking, the stronger the soul, the weaker the physical body. It wasn't that there weren't people who had both, but it was too rare. Zhuge Wanqiu belonged to the classic example of having a strong soul, but a weak physical body. In the end, she chose Shirtianhao, who had the strongest physical body martial arts among the 6 disciples. In the process of cultivation, shortcomings and weaknesses must be made up for, but more importantly, one must try their best to make use of their strengths and advantages. To make up for weaknesses and affect the development of strengths was not something that could be gained. But Zhuge Wanqiu chose this, and the reason for her choice was rather strange. Fortunately, no one knew about it, or else everyone's jaws would drop. Her choice was completely based on the wishes of her father, Zhuge Zhan. When her father, Zhuge Zhan, was about to enter the void battlefield, the father and daughter had a discussion about the specifics of the matter. Of course, it's to be the master of Xianmen. Do you still need to ask? Zhuge Zhan said matter-of-factly. Zhuge Wanqiu replied timidly, it's definitely not easy to become a direct disciple of a strong person like the master of Xianmen. I'm afraid I can't do it. Zhuge Zhan stared at her. How is that possible? My daughter. Halfway through his sentence, he thought of the terrifying strength that Xiao Yan, Shirtianhao, and the others had shown at their own level, and his heart was beating fast. Even if she can't become a direct disciple of the master of Xianmen, my daughter will definitely become a second-generation direct disciple. It can't be any lower. After thinking carefully, he said to Zhuge Wanqiu, daughter, when the time comes, you can be Shirtianhao's disciple. Although he's a little young, He's worthy of the title of heaven's favorite. It won't affect your cultivation. Zhuge Wanqiu did not object. She was already used to her father's arrangements. She was just slightly curious. Why him? Because he's the youngest and he's still a kid. Zhuge Zhan curled his lips. If it's an older one, don't take advantage of you. I know that there are dirty things happening in many factions nowadays. Masters make female disciples sleep with their masters. It's extremely bad. If you choose an older one as your master, I won't be at ease. As for the problem of your cultivation, it's not a big deal. Just follow him and cultivate with peace of mind. If there are any problems, after I return from the void battlefield, even if you become a disciple of a sect, I can still give you special treatment. At that time, your future path will only be smoother. Thus, Zhuge Wanqiu's father, who was almost crazy about his daughter, decided the choice of Zhuge Wanqiu's master with just a few words. The little girl and Dao Yuding happened to walk on opposite ends of the spectrum. She did not have her own opinions about her own matters, and felt that her father's words made sense, so she did as he said. Then, a scene that made everyone's jaw drop happened. Other than Dao Yuding and Zhuge Wanqiu, the group of foundation disciples were also carefully looking for the figures of Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu. These two were also the famous people who participated in this assessment. In the end, after looking around, they did not see them. Someone subconsciously looked in the direction of the All Heavens Hall, and his eyes immediately widened. There were two more people at the entrance of the All Heavens Hall. One of them was a tall and thin teenager with dark skin. It was Li Yuanfang, and the other looked like a little girl in her teens. It was Luo Qinggu. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, immediately understanding that the two of them had both passed the test before midnight, and would be personally taken in by Patriarch Lin Feng as a disciple. Chapter 6:16. Under the gazes of the others, Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu stood silently outside the All Heavens Hall, waiting quietly. The two of them didn't feel anything about the complicated gazes of the others. Li Yuanfang really didn't care, while the little girl was immersed in joy and didn't pay attention to anything else. Slowly, the doors of the All Heavens Hall opened. A voice rang in Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu's minds. Come in. The voice was calm, indifferent, and slightly amiable. It was Lin Feng's voice. Li Yuanfang bowed and immediately walked in. Luo Qinggu also came back to her senses. She also bowed and followed behind Li Yuanfang into the hall. On the throne in the hall, a purple-clothed young man sat cross-legged. He was relaxed and didn't look serious, but he had a dignified air about him. An expressionless, beautiful girl with half-black and half-white hair stood behind Lin Feng's seat with a huge sword case on her back. Her eyes were indifferent, as if there was no focus in them. She didn't react to Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu's entrance, turning a blind eye to them. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu came before the purple-clothed young man and bowed together. Disciple greets ancestral master. The person sitting on the throne was naturally Lin Feng. After not having to suppress the twin sky peaks, Xianli reappeared and silently followed beside him. Lin Feng looked at the two people in front of him, faintly smiling. Before the exam, I said that those who can pass the exam and reach Jade Capital Mountain before midnight, I will take them in as my personal disciples. He first looked at Li Yuanfang. Li Yuanfang lowered his head slightly. Disciple is slow, but I will definitely do my best. It's my honor to be able to become Ancestral Master's disciple. Lin Feng smiled and nodded. He looked at Luo Qinggu and said, You arrived at the right time, a minute before midnight. Although he was confident in Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu, Lin Feng did not go easy on them. The system had indeed evaluated everyone's potential, but data was just data. In the actual process, a slight deviation could cause a completely different effect. Taking Dao Yuding as an example, if one were to calculate the total value of innate bone strength, comprehension, and will, she and Luo Qinggu both had 24 points. However, due to the difference in their personal life experiences, when faced with the illusion of the inner demons, there was not much difference between Luo Qinggu, who had an 8-point willpower and a 7-point willpower. When faced with the bombardment of the treasure light, the pressure of the spiritual aura, and the test of choosing the path, Her 8-point willpower was inferior to that of Luo Qinggu, who had a 9-point willpower. As a result, she arrived at the top of the pagoda slightly later than Luo Qinggu. The two of them solved the questions at the top of the pagoda in roughly the same amount of time. However, it was precisely this difference of time that allowed the two of them to reach the top of the pagoda one after the other. They were stuck at the critical point at midnight and passed all the tests. The time difference was not much, but the results were different. As for this kind of deviation, Lin Feng would not deliberately correct it. Everyone had their own fate. Luo Qinggu arrived at the last moment and became a direct disciple. If she was slightly late, it was due to her ability and fate. Lin Feng would not make an exception for her. He would let her choose between Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others, just like Dao Yuding. For Li Yuanfang, it was the same principle. Seeing Lin Feng look at her, Luo Qinggu hurriedly lowered her body and said softly, "Xiao was lucky. I will work harder in the future." Lin Feng warmly encouraged them, then did not rush to have them perform the ceremony of becoming his disciple. Instead, he stood in the main hall and watched the process of the others going to the 6 great heavenly caves through the light and shadow illusion. This time, there were no less than 200 people participating in the test, but in the end, there were less than 20 who passed. The elimination rate was shockingly high. In terms of proportion, the elimination rate was even higher than the first Purple Qi Labyrinth test. This was intentional on Lin Feng's part. The sect was newly established. It was the time to lay the foundation. The first-generation disciples, Xiao Yan and the others, had already fully matured and would gradually become the pillars of the sect. The second-generation disciples shouldered the heavy responsibility of propagating the branches and leaves, which was equally important to the future development of the sect. As Xiao Yan and the others' cultivation grew higher and higher, they would completely open their path to becoming the Son of Heaven. They would travel the world and shock the world. At that time, it would be unrealistic to expect them to stay on the mountain and be teachers. To put it bluntly, Xiao Yan and the others would play the role of connecting the previous and the next in education. After that, their most important contribution to the sect would be in dealing with the outside world. They would become the face of Xianmen Tianzong and manage the overall situation of the sect. In terms of the younger generation's inheritance and internal construction, the second-generation disciples were the true main force. In the long run, the second-generation disciples, the following third-generation disciples, and the fourth-generation disciples would determine whether Xianmen Tianzong was a flash in the pan, or eventually grew into a powerful sect that could dominate Tianyuan even without relying on Lin Feng. That's why Lin Feng personally presided over the last few true disciple exams. Moreover, the standards were very strict, striving for perfection. After the development of the sect was on the right track, even if it relied on inertia, as long as it did not deviate from the general direction, it could continue to develop all the way. What Lin Feng needed to do now was to ensure that the sect was on the right track. Of course, there was another consideration that only he himself knew, and that was that these few successor disciple assessments were the talent reserve for Lin Feng's system's main task to meet the needs of the disciples in the Golden Elixir period. In addition to the task requiring the total number of disciples to exceed 1,000, and the disciples in the Yuanying period accounted for 1%, it also required the disciples in the Golden Elixir period to account for more than 10%. Relatively speaking, it was easier to meet the requirements than the disciples in the Yuanying period, but it also required early preparation to accumulate more talents in advance, and then carefully train them. In a sense, this was also a reserve for the task targets of the disciples in the Yuanying period. Although the system gave potential data, as mentioned before, the specific development of the situation often had a lot of changes. Who knew if there would be a dark horse that rushed out of the tight encirclement and gave people a surprise? The number of disciples who passed the assessment this time, including Dao Yuding and Zhuge Wanqiu, was a total of 19 people. Compared to the previous round of the independent selection of the disciples' master, there was not much difference overall. Xiao Yan and Zhu Yi were the most popular. Relatively speaking, the biggest difference was that Wang Lin's place had become very popular, instead of being visited by very few people before. In the void battlefield, The later stage of the Golden Elixir period blinded the early stage of the Yuanying period Shi Tiany's double pupil, directly breaking Shi Tiany's almost invincible legend among the younger generation. After that, he became the first disciple under Lin Feng to form his nascent soul. Compared to his previous low profile, such an explosive growth caused a huge contrast, and naturally left a deeper impression on people. Wang Lin was in charge of the scripture depository, the important place where Xianmen Tianzong's Taoist scriptures were stored, and it was the most important place. When he was apprenticed to a master last time, he was too low profile, and everyone did not understand him, so there were still doubts in their hearts. But now there was no more worry in this aspect, and naturally, Wang Lin's disciples became popular. Of course, there were some small reasons that outsiders did not know. For example, among the three goddess-like figures with the most outstanding appearance and charm among the second-generation disciples, other than Zhuge Wanqiu, Dao Yuding and Li Xingfei were both under Wang Lin's tutelage. After all, they were still young men. They were full of vigor. In comparison, Yu Hongyan was more popular, while Shi Tianhao and Yang Qing were still relatively less popular. Although Shi Tianhao had also demonstrated his prowess in the dragon arena, his age really was a barrier, which made many people shrink back. After all, the rapid progress of their own cultivation was not completely equivalent to whether they were a good master or not. The second-generation disciples were also hairless, but they were also worried about choosing an incompetent master. In the end, apart from Zhuge Wanqiu, only one other person chose to go to the desolate Heaven Valley. As for Yang Qing's Nirvana paradise, it was awkward once again. It ended up as a duck's egg. Not a single person chose to go. After all, compared to his seniors and juniors, Yang Qing had always seemed mediocre. Among Lin Feng's many direct disciples, he had the least presence, and his cultivation was the lowest. He was like an invisible person. When Fun Tianya, Xiaoyan Zhu Yi and so on in the heavenly hall saw this, they all frowned slightly. Yang Qing was a kind person, gentle and courteous. Outsiders felt that he was not eye-catching, but after interacting with his fellow disciples, they all had a close relationship with Yang Qing. At this moment, seeing that he was still cold in the sect, they could not help but sigh. On the other hand, Yang Qing himself did not particularly mind this. In his opinion, there were still many aspects of his sect that he did not understand that he needed to study, let alone teach his disciples. As for the matter of his pride, Yang Qing did not care about it at all. He had always admitted that he was indeed the worst among his seniors and juniors, so an outcome like this was normal. He would not remain indifferent because of this. He would definitely work even harder on his cultivation, but he would not feel aggrieved or indignant. After the group of disciples chose the blessed land and paradise that they wanted to be apprenticed to, it was time for Xiao Yan and the rest to test them. The seniors and juniors had always adhered to the train of thought of choosing disciples, which was that there was no best, only better. They had high standards, strict requirements, and looked up to their master Lin Feng. Their own disciples had to be the best. Hence, the layers of tests caused the group of second-generation disciples to complain incessantly. In the end, more than half of them could not pass the second round of tests, and were eliminated by a sea of people. In the end, only Dao Yuding, Zhuge Wanqiu, and a few others passed Xiaoyan, Wang Lin and the rest's tests. Lin Feng was also observing. After passing Xiaoyan's second round of tests, there were a few good seedlings that stood out. Both of them were women. One was called Kujing, and the other was called Sun Shuer. Both of them performed well. It's just that, this group of people is a bit more yin than yang. Lin Feng secretly scratched his head. Including Dao Yuding and Zhuge Wanqiu, in this second round of successor disciple selection, the most outstanding few people were actually all female disciples. Including Lin Feng's side and Luo Qingwu's, poor Li Yuanfang was impressively a little green among the Red Mountains. The true disciples who did not pass Xiao Yan and Company's test were all a bit dejected, but what was worth them rejoicing over is that this time they will not be returned like the first test. They can still become true disciples, it's just that Lin Feng will randomly assign a master. After listening to Yang Qing's own opinion, Lin Feng finally left his sect empty, and did not make a rigid assignment. Later, Everyone who had their own sect, under the leadership of their respective masters, came back to the All Heavens Hall to greet Lin Feng. After the greeting, it was time to observe the ceremony. A group of little friends looked at Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu kneeling under Lin Feng with slight envy, and formally performed the ceremony of apprenticeship. Chapter 617. In the Celestial Hall, Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu bowed to Lin Feng together, and formally became Lin Feng's personal disciples. Lin Feng personally taught them the Taoist scriptures of the 8 trigrams of the Great Way of the Heavens. After the ceremony of apprenticeship, the two of them greeted Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and other senior and junior brothers. In Lin Feng's disciple system, there was also a list of the two people's notes. Name: Li Yuanfang. Age: 17 years and 2 months. Current cultivation: early stage of foundation building, Sea of Qi realm. Potential attribute: root bone 7, comprehension 9, will 9, fortune 6. Recommended education plan: extremely high comprehension of formations, amazing talent, recommended as the main development direction of divine power. Lin Feng looked at the description and nodded slightly. Li Yuanfang's character was strict and serious, and he also had perfectionist tendencies. Coupled with his extraordinary talent and comprehension, he was indeed promising in the path of formations. In the process of getting along with him, Lin Feng had confirmed this many times. Of course, in addition to formations, Li Yuanfang's talent in the cultivation of Taoist techniques was also very outstanding. When the Taoist techniques he originally practiced under Ancestor, he too were transformed into the 8 trigrams of the Great Way of the Heavens, his realm would be more stable, and his personal strength would go to a higher level. The only concern was his root bone, which could only be regarded as above average. In ordinary sects he would be a genius, but in Xianmen Tianzong he seemed very inconspicuous. The direct problem was whether he could use the 8 trigrams of the Great Way of the Heavens to build a first-grade beer when he built his beer. In this aspect, Lin Feng definitely had to pay attention to it. With Li Yuanfang's temperament, there would basically be no problem in condensing the elixir cauldron in the future. When he formed his gold core in the future, there would also not be a big problem. After looking at Li Yuanfang's information, Lin Feng looked at Luo Qingwu's information. Name: Luo Qingwu. Age: 10 years and 2 months. Current cultivation: Qi disciple level 8. Potential attribute: root bone 9, comprehension 8, will 7, fortune 6. Recommended education plan: upgrade the heavenly Yin spirit pearl and obtain a purine body. It is recommended to cultivate Yin attributed Dao arts. In addition, outstanding talent in Sword Dao is recommended as the main development direction of divine powers. Lin Feng frowned slightly. Outstanding talent in swordsmanship? I couldn't tell. Everything else was fine, but the system's evaluation of Luo Qingwu's outstanding talent in swordsmanship stunned Lin Feng. He thought about it carefully. The Luo clan of the ancient Yuan-Tian realms inherited Taoist arts and signature magical power was the magical power of martial arts, the art of saber manipulation. Ever since she was young, little Lolita had been practicing the saber Dao divine art. Among the treasures that her family had confiscated from her when she was young, there was an extremely high-quality saber from the Golden Elixir period. Before the shattering of the heavenly Yin spirit pearl, the Luo family really doted on little Lolita. She was just a Qi disciple, but they gave her a Dharma artifact from the Golden Elixir period to protect her. It could be said that they doted on her. Because of the family's inheritance, little Lolita had never come into contact with Sword Dao. Therefore, no one knew how talented she was in this aspect. If little Lolita hadn't become Lin Feng's disciple and stayed in the Luo family, regardless of whether the heavenly Yin spirit pearl existed or not, she would have definitely followed the established path to cultivate the Sword Dao divine art. The only difference was the level of attainment. She had never come into contact with it, and she couldn't remember to come into contact with it. Naturally, she wouldn't know whether she had talent or not. Especially as she grew older and her cultivation gradually increased, she would never abandon the saber and use the sword. Lin Feng looked at the system's explanation and clicked his tongue in wonder. He glanced at Luo Qingwu, and Luo Qingwu's eyes met his. Suddenly, her body trembled slightly. Little Lolita instantly felt as if her consciousness and body were separated, and her consciousness entered a completely unfamiliar world. In this world, sword lights that were as dense as raindrops rained down on her head from all directions. Luo Qingwu was still calm. She believed that her master wouldn't harm her. There must be a deeper meaning behind this. With this mentality, Luo Qingwu bathed in the sword rain without fear, resistance, or evasion. Instead, she used her heart to feel the hidden profoundness. Her consciousness condensed into a transparent body and rose into the air. She tapped the tip of her foot lightly and landed on a sharp sword gleam. After that, she immediately rose up and dodged a large number of sword gleams. Then, she landed on another sword gleam and tapped the tip of her foot again. In the beginning, her movements were still jerky and stiff as she moved around the sword gleams. She was surrounded by danger, which made people break out in cold sweat for her. However, as time passed, Luo Qingwu's movements became more agile. Not only did she not seem to be struggling, but there was also a different kind of beauty to her movements. She was like a fairy dancing in the sword rain. Even Luo Qingwu herself had a strange feeling that the sword gleams that covered the sky and covered the sun weren't scary at all. Instead, she felt amiable. All of a sudden, the sword rain in front of her disappeared. Luo Qingwu was slightly dazed. Her consciousness separated from that unfamiliar world as if her soul had returned to her body. The scene in front of her changed back to the scene in the All Heavens Grand Hall. Little Lolita looked at Lin Feng curiously. She was slightly apprehensive, but it wasn't appropriate for her to ask. Lin Feng retracted his gaze. Just now he had used his supernatural power to strip off Luo Qingwu's soul. Then he did a simple test to see if she was as talented as the system said. Luo Qingwu felt that a long time had passed. She had been dancing in the storm of sword lights for countless years, but in fact, it was just the blink of an eye. In the process of Lin Feng looking at her, she had already completed the test. The test results satisfied Lin Feng. The system's judgment was basically correct. Luo Qingwu's talent in the sword Dao was indeed very outstanding. Her cultivation in the past had covered up her amazing talent. In a certain sense, it had buried her talent. Through the test, Lin Feng discovered that Luo Qingwu's talent in the sword Dao wasn't in martial arts. It wasn't the usual sword manipulation, the one with the sword light birth, etc. Instead, it was a kind of profound concept of being a partner with the sword and resonating with each other. If I continue to cultivate her in this direction, I wonder to what extent she will grow? Lin Feng thought to himself. Her talent in the sword Dao should be matched with the advantages of her pure Yin body. It will bring out the best in each other, and produce an effect that is greater than two. However, Lin Feng looked up at the sky slightly. It feels like she's not very suitable to inherit my heaven-punishing sword qi. However, it doesn't matter. Let's see if there are any second and third generation disciples who can stand out in the future. He looked down at Luo Qingwu and said with a smile, Xiaowu, have you ever thought of practicing the sword Dao? After the test just now, Luo Qingwu naturally understood Lin Feng's intentions. She quickly nodded. Xiaowu will listen to master's instructions. In fact, after experiencing the scene just now, Xiaowu herself also felt that the sword Dao was indeed more suitable for her. Lin Feng gave a few more words of encouragement to Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu before announcing the end of the test. The group of foundational disciples was sent back to Cloud Peak. Everyone was reluctant to leave. After staying on Yujing Mountain, the environment of Cloud Peak seemed to be a little lacking. They were able to adjust their mentality and made up their minds to go back and cultivate seriously. They would strive to become true disciples in the next test. The group of true disciples also followed their respective masters back to their respective blessed lands and grotto heavens to start practicing Dao. Becoming a true disciple was just the beginning of the path of cultivation. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu were still staying on Yujing Mountain for the time being. Lin Feng naturally took the matter of them opening their abodes to heart. He had already made arrangements, but it would take some time. After paying their respects to Lin Feng, Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu returned to their original abodes on the mountain. They still needed to seriously figure out the 8 trigrams Great Way scripture that Lin Feng taught them, and transform their original Dao foundation. After Luo Qinggu returned to the cave, Jun Zining was holding her cheeks while waiting for her in a daze. Seeing Luo Qinggu come in, Jun Zining came back to her senses and said with a smile, "Xiao Wu, congratulations on becoming Senior Lin's personal disciple." "Sister Zining, I feel like I'm dreaming now. The thing I've been looking forward to all this time has come true. I can't believe that I've really become Master's disciple." Luo Qinggu sat next to Jun Zining. She was still a little dizzy. She looked at Jun Zining. "Sister Zining, why don't you become his disciple?" Jun Zining sighed. "My family knows that I'm here. They also want me to become a disciple of Xian Zongtian, but they are worried that there will be misunderstandings with Zixiao Dao. I thought about it carefully. Xianmen Tianzong and Zixiao Dao shouldn't have a rift because of a nobody like me, but it's a bit awkward for my family to be stuck in the middle. You also know that my Jun family is not the same as the other 6 families. You are just supported. My Jun family's ancestors were born in Zixiao Dao. The relationship between the 2 sides is much closer, so we have to consider all aspects." Luo Qinggu asked, "How can it be so exaggerated?" "Sister Zining, you're worrying too much." Jun Zining said, "This is what my family wants, so I have to listen. This time, I ran away and caused a lot of trouble for my family. I don't want to cause more trouble for my family, so I'd rather believe it." Luo Qinggu shook her head. "I still can't figure it out." "If you can't figure it out, then don't think about it." Jun Zining stretched her waist. "Let's wait and see. Maybe I can make it in time for the next disciple ceremony." Luo Qinggu said, "If that's the case, I hope you can also pass the assessment. That way, not only will we be sisters, but we will also be fellow disciples." Jun Zining smiled and said, "I don't dare to hope for that. My talent is not as good as yours, so I most likely won't be able to become a disciple of Senior Lin. If I can become a true disciple, that would be a blessing in my life." She said with a smile, "That's not bad. Although I'm a 2nd-generation disciple, my best friend is everyone's martial aunt. I can ride roughshod over everyone." Luo Qinggu wrinkled her little nose at her. "Call me martial aunt or master first." The 2 little sisters laughed and joked. At this time, Xiao Yan, who was in charge of external relations, received news that in order to congratulate Xianmen Tianzong's 2nd disciple ceremony, Great Zhou's Prince Liang Qian had sent a messenger with congratulatory gifts. The messenger came to Cloud Mirror City, through the array of Shazhou City. The person who came was a young man in his teens. He was only at the foundation establishment stage, but his expression was calm and capable, and there was a faint brilliance in his eyes. Dao Jiqiang was the first to receive him. The young man cupped his hands as soon as he saw him. "I am Chu Yang. Nice to meet you, sir." Chapter 6:18. Dao Jiqiang sized up Chu Yang and thought, "I've heard of this person's name from Elder Zhu Yi. When he was still in the qi refinement stage, he became the confidant of Great Zhou's Prince Liang Qian. He's a disciple of Beyond Heaven Mountain, but I've never heard of such an outstanding talent among the younger generation of Beyond Heaven Mountain. He seems to have suddenly appeared in the last 1 or 2 years. Could he be a core disciple that Beyond Heaven Mountain is secretly nurturing? But looking at his mannerisms, he treats people very maturely. He doesn't seem like someone who cultivates in the deep mountains." As Dao Jiqiang was observing Chu Yang was also observing him. This Dao Jiqiang, although his cultivation base isn't high, his cultivation talent is also average. He's still unable to form his gold core in his middle age, but he has taken up the position of Xianmen Tianzong's outer sect chief supervisor, occupying this extremely important position. According to the intelligence, this person originally worked in Wu Qingrou's residence before joining Xianmen Tianzong. He seems inconspicuous, but he's actually quite important. I'm afraid I'll have to deal with him often in the future." Chu Yang smiled and cupped his hands at Dao Jiqiang. "Mister, I'm Chu Yang. I've come under the 4th Prince's order to send a congratulatory gift to congratulate your sect on its 2nd disciple recruitment." Dao Jiqiang smiled amiably, and didn't look down on Chu Yang because of his age and cultivation. nor did he have the slightest intention of being arrogant. He cupped his hands in greeting as well. "Thank you for your good intentions, Prince of the Great Zhou Dynasty. I thank you on behalf of my sect master." Chu Yang asked tentatively. "I wonder if I have the honor to meet the sect master of Xian sect or the various elders of the sect?" Dao Jiqiang smiled and said, "The sect master and elders of Xian sect have just gone into seclusion. I'm afraid it's inconvenient for them to meet guests. Please don't take offense if I've been rude." "Not at all, not at all. I've been presumptuous." Chu Yang nodded. He wasn't disappointed. He didn't have much hope in the first place. Not only was Lin Feng's prestige growing, even Zhu Yi, who had interacted with him before, was now at the Yuanying stage. In any other clan he would be a patriarch. If the fourth prince, Liang Qian, were to come in person, there might be a chance that he would be received. After both parties checked the gifts, Dao Jiqiang once again thanked Liang Qian on behalf of Xianmen Tianzong for his kindness, and gave him some gifts in return. Chu Yang arranged for his entourage to return the gifts, but he himself indicated that he would be permanently stationed at Mount Kunlun, hoping to obtain Xianmen Tianzong's permission. Dao Jiqiang was not surprised by this. After the Battle of West Hill City, many other sects and forces had sent people over. Basically, they were all in the Sand Continent City area, and were responsible for contacting Xianmen Tianzong. It was Dao Jiqiang's responsibility to settle these people down. However, Liang Qian and Chu Yang's side was slightly different. Liang Qian was a prince of the Great Zhou Dynasty, and not the leader of an independent force. However, when Zhu Yi was in Tianjing City, he had a good chat with Liang Qian. Because of Crown Prince Liang Yuan, they had even worked together before. Dao Jiqiang thought for a while, then agreed to allow Chu Yang to stay in Sand Continent City. Speaking of which, as Xianmen Tianzong's power grew, even Sand Continent City was gradually included in Xianmen Tianzong's sphere of influence. Tianmao Pavilion was established in business. As long as it didn't interfere with trade, they didn't mind. Their relationship with Xianmen Tianzong became even closer. Crown Prince Liang Yuan of the Great Zhou has just been reprimanded by Emperor Liang Pan for the Joss flame cult. His position as Crown Prince is even showing signs of instability. Fourth Prince Liang Qian is even more interested in the position of Crown Prince. Contacting the main sect is a great help. Dao Jiqiang thought to himself, but he can't get too close to our sect, or else it will inevitably arouse Liang Pan's suspicions. Sending a young man with a low cultivation base, who won't attract attention, but can be relied on as a trusted aide, to be stationed here is a brilliant move. It's fortunate that he has a suitable subordinate like Chu Yang. After confirming that he would stay here for a long time, Chu Yang smiled as he bid farewell to Dao Jiqiang and left. His gaze seemed to inadvertently sweep across Cloud Mirror City in front of him, and the distant Mirror Lake on the other side of the Cloud Peak, before finally looking at the empty blue sky. Although he didn't know where Yujing Mountain was, he couldn't help but look at the sky. When I came here last time, it was still a barren mountain, but now, a grand city has risen from the ground, and a great lake has even appeared. It's unbelievable. Chu Yang sighed inside. Though with the power and abilities of the master of the School of Wonders, all of this is but a piece of cake. Luo Qinggu had appeared in West Hill City, and Xianmen Tianzong had even come into a small conflict with the Taishu Temple because of her. Yu Hongyan had heavily injured by Xiqian. This news had already spread across the world before the battle between the stones in the Dragon Arena. Although Chu Yang was in the Great Zhou Dynasty, he obviously knew about it too. Before this, Chu Yang had finally obtained accurate information from the Crown Prince's young master, Chen Yu. Luo Qinggu had indeed stayed temporarily in his estate, and he had received news from the Luo clan of the ancient origin heaven world. Just like in Chu Yang's memories, Luo Qinggu had encountered a disaster, and her heaven's accumulation of Yin Soul Pearl was on the verge of shattering. Chu Yang was extremely worried about this, but there just happened to be no news of Luo Qinggu after she left Chen Yu's estate. Afterwards, he received news that Luo Qinggu had appeared in West Hill City. Not only was she safe and sound, but she had even become the renowned possessor of the pure Yin body. Chu Yang could not help but let out a great sigh of relief. At first he ravished with joy. He had finally obtained accurate information about Luo Qinggu, and Luo Qinggu was safe and sound. But afterwards, he became conflicted again. When Xianmen Tianzong opened their doors for the second time, Luo Qinggu had become a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong. Xianmen Tianzong's headquarters, Yujing Mountain, was hidden in space. It was impossible for outsiders to visit. For example, even if Chu Yang hurried to the Kunlun Mountains, he would only be able to reach Cloud Mirror City at most. He could not even make it to the top of the clouds, let alone Yujing Mountain. As a matter of fact, even if he stayed in Cloud Mirror City temporarily, he would only stay there temporarily under the excuse of delivering the congratulatory gift. Even if he stayed there permanently in the future, he would have to go to San Province City. Everything is difficult at the beginning. There will always be a chance. Chu Yang sighed. This time, Liang Qian wanted to send a trusted aide to stay here permanently to communicate with him. Chu Yang was indeed the most suitable candidate. He did not even need to say anything or even hint. Liang Qian and the others had taken the initiative to suggest it. Of course, little Chu Yang could not have come all the way to the Great Western Desert to eat sand purely to pick up girls. Although deep in his heart, he had always faintly resisted having too much contact with Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong. But this time, Chu Yang still adjusted his attitude and came. His sect, Beyond Heaven Mountain, had previously been very close to the Shushan Sword sect, almost attaching itself to Shushan. This was partly due to Wu Qingrou's plan from a long time ago, and partly due to the decisions of the upper echelons of Beyond Heaven Mountain. Now Wu Qingrou's plan had been temporarily put on hold, but there was a faint new danger emerging, causing Beyond Heaven Mountain to no longer be peaceful. In Chu Yang's memories, whether it was a dream or a real future, the reason why Beyond Heaven Mountain was destroyed was because it was used by Wu Qingru as the fuse for the conflict between the Great Zhou dynasty and the Shushan Sword sect. In the end, it was crushed by the Great Zhou dynasty. Although it seemed like the Great Zhou dynasty would not clash with the Shushan Sword sect again, Xianmen Tianzong had replaced the Great Zhou dynasty's position, opposing the Shushan Sword sect with equal harshness. Chu Yang had a very deep worry. He was worried that the events in his memories would repeat in a different way. Whether it was the Shushan Sword sect or Xianmen Tianzong, if they wanted to destroy Beyond Heaven Mountain, it would be as easy as lifting a finger. One reason he came to Kunlun Mountain this time was to find a chance to see Luo Qinggu again, but he was not in a hurry. After all, he knew that Luo Qinggu was currently safe and sound, and had a great opportunity. Chu Yang's main purpose of this trip was actually to seek a chance to interact with Xianmen Tianzong, and to fight for a new path for his sect, Beyond Heaven Mountain. In Chu Yang's heart, although he felt an indescribable fear when facing Lin Feng, a kind of uneasiness that came from the unknown, between Xianmen Tianzong and the Shushan Sword sect, he was more inclined towards Xianmen Tianzong. My current cultivation is still too low, and my status is not high enough. It is definitely impossible for me to seek a path for Beyond Heaven Mountain, but I will try my best to establish a friendly relationship. When the elders of the sect come over, they can also help me build a bridge. One step at a time, from the outside to the inside, slowly operating. After Chu Yang settled down in the Sand Continent City, he thought to himself, sigh, it's just that time waits for no one. I hope that after the Mount Shu Sword sect suffered a loss in Xiling City this time, they will not clash with the celestial sect of Xian for a short period of time. I'm just afraid that there will be a third party with ulterior motives, and that the two great powers will soon start fighting again. On Jade Capital Mountain, Dao Jiqiang came up the mountain with Liang Qian's congratulatory gifts. Among the gifts were for Lin Feng himself, Xiaoyan Zhu Yi, and the others. However, Liang Qian and Chu Yang naturally did not know that Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu had joined the sect, so they had only prepared 6 gifts. Lin Feng received the gift list and scanned it. When he heard that Chu Yang had come to send gifts, a strange smile immediately appeared on his lips. Although the gifts on the list were exquisite, with Liang Qian's wealth, there were not many gifts that could catch the eye of Lin Feng. After all, the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. However, Lin Feng could see that Liang Qian had indeed put in a lot of effort. What made Lin Feng not know whether to laugh or cry was that there was one item on the list that was most suitable for cultivators with a purine body. Lin Feng himself had no use for this item, so it was obvious that it was prepared for Luo Qingwu. Luo Qingwu's purine body was widely known. It was understandable that Liang Qian thought highly of her potential, and felt that she would definitely be able to occupy a place in Xianmen Tianzong in the future. However, Lin Feng was 80% sure that this gift was Chu Yang's idea. Even the item itself had been offered by him. After finding out that Chu Yang had been ordered to stay in the Sand Continent, Lin Feng could not help but laugh and shake his head. Rascal, you're still thinking about my disciple? Then you'll have to eat sand in the Sand Continent city for a few years and wait for my disciple to grow up. The little girl naturally did not know that someone was thinking about her. She was currently being watched by Shi Tianhao and the others. Ha 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 ha. Shi Tianhao threw his head back and laughed. The world is everlasting, and changes are endless. Lord Shi Tianhao is no longer the youngest. Back then, he had volunteered to be the youngest junior brother, and the other senior brothers and sisters who had entered the sect were indeed older than him. Therefore, Shi Tianhao had always been willing to endure the hardship. However, as time passed, he felt that it would not be bad if he could have a junior brother or sister. When the time came, if his junior brother or sister was bullied, he could just stand there and defeat the opponent. Then his junior brother or sister would proudly say, "This is my senior brother Shi." TSK, just thinking about it made him feel proud. Chapter 619. Luo Qingwu was only 10 years old, even younger than Shi Tianhao. Once she entered the sect, she would not be able to be the senior sister, becoming everyone's junior sister. Even though the little Shi Tianhao was still the junior brother, he was no longer at the bottom. But Li Yuanfang insisted on calling Shi Tianhao senior brother. In the end, Shi Tianhao was teased by Xiao Yan and the others. With Luo Qingwu as his foundation, he did not care too much about this, and so insisted on keeping his word. If he wanted to reason, then Li Yuanfang could reason with him. But since he said that he would keep his word, Li Yuanfang felt that it was not good for him to persist. Xiao Wu greets senior brother, senior sister. The little lowly respectfully bowed to Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, Yu Hongyan and the others. As she spoke, she suddenly felt a gaze fixed on her. Turning her head to look, she saw a little girl even younger than her. This little girl had 2 pigtails, and was born snow-white and cute, making Luo Qingwu feel happy when she saw her, but the other's gaze was not very friendly. Xiao Yan turned to look at the little girl. "Tuntin, what's wrong with you again?" Tuntin snorted, not saying anything. Shi Tianhao smiled. "You learn from my junior sister, be a bit more refined and obedient. That way you'll be able to marry in the future. Haven't you always been thinking about that mysterious nether beast? Maybe it's because of your devilish brat conduct that people don't want you. It's fine if others call me that, but I don't want you to call me a devilish brat," Tuntin complained. She glanced at Luo Qingwu and snorted. "Besides, she's only obedient on the surface. She's actually not as good as me." Luo Qingwu's eyes widened, looking strangely at Tuntin. Tuntin glared at her fiercely. "What are you looking at? Did I wrongly accuse you?" Xiao Yan asked. "What basis do you have for saying that?" Tuntin curled its lips. "A woman's. No, a female Taoya's intuition." Xiao Yan and the others rolled their eyes. Shi Tianhao sneered and said, "I'd rather believe that pigs can climb trees than believe you." Luo Qingwu shrunk back to Xiao Yan's side timidly. She blinked her eyes and asked carefully, "Did I do something wrong before?" "You didn't do anything wrong. Someone is just crazy." Xiao Yan blushed as he shielded Luo Qingwu behind him. He stared at Tuntin and said, "Don't you dare provoke my junior sister. Otherwise, we'll settle our old and new debts together." Tuntin shouted in dissatisfaction, "I'm telling the truth." She glanced at Xiao Yan and the others and snorted heavily. "Males like you are easily deceived by false appearances." Yu Hongyan raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard that. Before he could speak, Tuntin shouted at her, "You've been led astray by them too." After saying that, Tuntin ran away without looking back, leaving Yu Hongyan and the others who did not know whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Yan turned to Luo Qingwu and said, "If she dares to find trouble with you, Come and tell eldest senior brother. Luo Qingwu said softly in a soft voice. I'll just hide from her in the future. Are you kidding me? Xiaoyan raised his eyebrows. Afraid of her? Give her some guts and try. If she dares to touch you, I'll beat her back to the state of a remnant soul. Shi Tianhao patted the little lowly's head. Don't be so timid, don't be so soft-hearted. It's always been us bullying others. We can't let others bully us, understand? As Shi Tianhao spoke, he felt that it was very touching and patted Luo Qingwu's little head again. He instantly felt that his master and senior brothers loved to do this when he was young. And it was not without reason. It felt pretty good. However, now that he had grown up, he would definitely not let them pat him anymore. But before his little junior sister grew up, he could still find some supplements. Luo Qingwu answered crisply. Yes, I'll remember. A consciousness suddenly surged into her mind, and Lin Feng's figure appeared, looking at her with a faint smile on his face. Luo Qingwu quickly stuck out her tongue. Lin Feng's consciousness retreated from Luo Qingwu's mind, and he could not help but find it a little funny. Needless to say, Tuntun's intuition was quite accurate. Lin Feng had a rather deep understanding of Luo Qingwu. He clearly knew that although she appeared childish and clumsy most of the time, this little lowly was in fact a little mischievous. She looked obedient and cute on the outside, but was actually a naughty child on the inside, and was more similar to Shi Tianhao. Just now, she retreated in order to advance, and instantly tricked Tuntun. To be precise, Tuntun jumped into the pit itself, and the little lowly helped it fill in a few shovelfuls of soil. That idiot Tuntun must be feeling very wrong now, right? Lin Feng shook his head and laughed. If he were to give Tuntun an internal monologue at this moment, it would probably be like this. I have tattoos, smoke, drink, swear. No, wrong. It should be me who is gluttonous, stupid, straightforward, and swear, but I know I'm a good girl. A real bitch likes to pretend to be innocent, pure, shy, and likes to wear pink. No red clothes. Men are superficial and only look at the surface. Therefore, they can only miss out on a good girl and be deceived by a bitch until they wish they were dead. Only women can tell who is a real bitch. These were the words that were rolling over and over in Tuntun's heart at this moment. Lin Feng chuckled. In reality, how could Xiaoyan, Shi Tianhao and the rest not be able to tell what Luo Qingwu was like after interacting with her for a while? They just liked to tease the two little girls. Luo Qingwu was a little mischievous, but she was not very aggressive, and generally would not take the initiative to provoke others. If Tuntun had not taken the initiative to show hostility in the beginning, Luo Qingwu naturally would not have taken the opportunity to help her fill in the soil. It was normal for youngsters to like to tease each other. Tuntun would not really hurt Luo Qingwu, and most likely wanted to expose the White Lotus' true face. However, no matter how I look at it, I feel that her future is not optimistic. Lin Feng laughed unscrupulously. A hot-tempered person and a black-bellied person together, under the premise that no violence is used. No matter how I look at it, the hot-tempered person is more likely to be at a disadvantage. At this point, Lin Feng's personal disciples had also arranged their seats. The first disciple, Xiaoyan, the second disciple, Zhu Yi, the third disciple, Wang Lin, the fourth disciple, Yu Hongyan, and the fifth disciple, Yang Qing, remained the same, but the sixth disciple, Li Yuanfang, was added, followed by everyone's little junior brother, Shi Tianhao, and little junior sister, Luo Qingwu. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu were new disciples, and they had to transform their original Taoist foundation into the 8 trigrams Great Way scripture. Xiaoyan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin and the rest all had new disciples that needed to be taught. The second assessment to select a successor disciple was different from the first assessment to select a successor disciple. During the first selection, the foundation disciples had already gone through a certain degree of basic training under the guidance of Zhu Yi, and then they separately acknowledged each other as their master. Among the people who passed the second assessment, there were the Sand Continent's founding disciples who failed the previous assessment and had gone through a long period of basic training. But there were also the West Hill City's founding disciples. Some of them had no foundation in Taoist techniques at all, and although some of them had, they were not taught systematically by Xianmen Tianzong. So the successor disciples this time, Xiaoyan, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, Yu Hongyan and the rest had it harder than the previous time. Without Zhu Yi to lay the foundation for them, a portion of the new successor disciples had to be taught from the beginning. Yang Qing had no one to acknowledge him as a master, and he himself was happy to be at ease. After proper preparation, he finally began his seclusion to break through to the Golden Elixir realm. And after settling the matters on hand, Xiao Yan and Shi Tianhao also began to prepare for forming their nascent soul. Lin Feng was not worried about Shi Tianhao forming his nascent soul. In fact, before the battle with Shi Tianhao already had the strength to break through to the Yuanying realm, but in order to achieve perfection, he deliberately delayed it. Now that he had won the battle with Shi Tianhao and ended the karma between them, whether it was his state of mind or his mana, they had reached the best state. At this time, going through the void thunder tribulation to form his nascent soul was no longer a sure thing, but a 100% sure thing. What Lin Feng was more concerned about was Yang Qing forming his nascent soul, as well as Xiao Yan forming his nascent soul. Yang Qing's personal state of mind was a problem. His mana, supernatural power, and understanding of his own body were already infinitely close to the level of immortality. The only difficulty was in breaking through the difficulties of life and death. If he could get through the hurdle of his state of mind, then forming his nascent soul would be as easy as walking on flat ground. However, with Yang Qing's character, since he dared to take this step, it meant that he was very confident in his heart. Even if there was a trace of ambiguity, he might not break through to the Golden Elixir period now. It seemed that his previous deliberate training was fruitful. Therefore, Lin Feng was not particularly worried about Yang Qing. He just needed to take care of him a little. The one with more problems was Xiao Yan. Of course, the problem did not lie with Xiao Yan himself. With Xiao Yan's current state of mind and mana, forming his nascent soul was actually not that difficult. However, Lin Feng had a rather crazy idea. If he could succeed, Xiao Yan's strength after forming his nascent soul would be much stronger than expected. However, it was precisely because of this idea that Xiao Yan's nascent soul formation would be more dangerous and difficult. Therefore, most of Lin Feng's energy fell on his side to protect him and turn his idea into reality. After listening to Lin Feng's explanation, Xiao Yan's first reaction was to agree. He was bold and brave by nature, and was not afraid of hardships and dangers. Lin Feng's idea was just to his liking. After everything began, as Lin Feng expected, the first to achieve results was Shi Tianhao. After the Void Thunder tribulation, Shi Tianhao's golden elixir split open, and a shining baby appeared on top of his head. Around the baby's body, there were two colorful ribbon-like creation divine light hovering and dancing. The brilliance and aura in the divine light were restrained. It looked very ordinary, but it had a kind of power that could shock the world. Congratulations to the host's pro-disciple, Shi Tianhao, for advancing to the Yuanying stage. The sound of the system notification rang in Lin Feng's ears. Shi Tianhao, who was in front of him, also slowly retracted his Yuanying stage. He opened his eyes and let out a long roar. Then he bowed to Lin Feng. "Thank you, Master, for your teachings in the past." "Very good, you did very well." Lin Feng nodded repeatedly. "I still have to take care of your eldest senior brother and your fifth senior brother, so I give you a task. After nourishing Yuanying and stabilizing your realm, arrange the cultivation matters of your disciples, and then go find something and bring it back." Chapter 620. Lin Feng looked straight into Shi Tianhao's eyes. As their eyes met, a divine sense message was transmitted into Shi Tianhao's mind. Shi Tianhao's eyes lit up. "Oh, so this bronze void cauldron doesn't exist alone. It's actually a set of 9. Lin Feng nodded his head. "Nourish your nascent soul for a bit, after your realm has stabilized. Then follow the information I passed to you just now and go find this last cauldron. You're someone else's master now. Before you leave, make arrangements for your disciples' cultivation." Shi Tianhao replied. "Don't worry, Master. Disciple will make arrangements." Lin Feng gently flicked his finger. A stream of light flew into the air, and turned into a ball of purple gas. The purple gas was only the size of a fist, but it contained a small world created by Lin Feng's magic power. The space inside was incomparably huge. In this small world, there was a huge shadow of light. Upon closer inspection, it was an incomparably huge palace. The palace was incomparably majestic, as if it came from an ancient divine kingdom. It was unbelievably huge, tens of millions of feet tall. The surface of the palace flashed with golden light. The palace itself was green, but the tall and thick foundation below was pitch black. Within the golden light, countless runes and seals kept appearing, like tumbling waves in an ocean of light. Boundless power spread out, making one's heart palpitate. This was Lin Feng's treasure, the Kuanpeng Palace. This treasure had been refined by Lin Feng using half of the ancient Kuanpeng's remains from the Arctic ice sea as the main material. Although it looked like a building, it had fused the different powers of the Kuanpeng and the Kuanpeng. It was extremely mysterious. The palace turned pure black, fused with the Kuanpeng's power. Its power was almost limitless, and at the same time, it was extremely sturdy. When it collided with an opponent, it was indestructible. The palace turned green, fused with the Kuanpeng's power. Its power was slightly weaker than the Black Kuan Palace, but its ability to move through the void was better. It could match the Kuanpeng's speed, and with a flap of its wings, it could soar into the sky. When refining this treasure, Lin Feng added other treasures on top of the Kuanpeng's remains. Back then in the Cloud Forest world, Lin Feng had seized a few treasures that the Golden Rock Great Sage and the Cheongqi Great Sage used to set up the 9 Glory Sky-shattering formation. Amongst them, besides the Netherunicorn skeleton and the Netherflower amethyst, there was also a black seal platform that served as the vessel for the Earth Star suppressing formation. The seal platform looked ordinary, and it was pitch black in color. However, it exuded an unshakable and powerful force that could suppress everything. It was incomparably heavy. This thing was the peak of an immemorial god mountain that had been shaved off. It was a very good magic treasure embryo. After Lin Feng reached the nascent soul realm, he did not refine the black stamp into a magic treasure on its own. Instead, he merged it with the Kuanpeng Hall and refined it together. This allowed the extremely heavy power of the black stamp to combine with the Black Kuan Hall, increasing its power to a whole new level. Apart from that, the Heavenly Wind Fan, the magic treasure of the master of the Wind God sect, Lord Heavenly Wind, who had destroyed the Wind God sect, had also fallen into Lin Feng's hands. Although the Heavenly Wind Fan was damaged, it was still possible to repair it. However, Lin Feng did not repair it. Instead, he refined it together with the Kuanpeng Hall, combining the storm power within with the Greenpeng Hall. As a result, the Kuanpeng Hall was actually refined from the combination of the ancient Kuanpeng's body, the black stamp platform, and the remains of the Heavenly Wind Fan. Lin Feng had also refined it with his own magical powers, so the power of this magic treasure was extremely great, far surpassing that of regular magic treasures. Although it was only at the spirit nourishment level, many incarnation level magic treasures were no match for it. In the dragon arena of the ancient Sky Dragon domain, Lin Feng had once temporarily lent this treasure to Shi Tianhao just in case. Sure enough, it came in handy later on. When Shi Tianyi's protective magic treasure, the Void Flag, appeared, the Kuanpeng Hall brazenly attacked. Scroll Void Flag couldn't beat Shi Tianyi, nor could he run away. He could only watch as Shi Tianyi was killed by Shi Tianhao. Shi Tianhao naturally recognized this magic treasure. His large eyes immediately lit up. "Master, does this treasure belong to me completely?" With that, Lin Feng erased the restrictions on himself, and then pointed out the magic treasure's origin spirit, which was still in a budding state of self-awareness, to obey Shi Tianhao and accept Shi Tianhao's refinement. With that, Lin Feng erased the restrictions on himself, and then pointed out the magic treasure's origin spirit, which was still in a budding state of self-awareness, to obey Shi Tianhao and accept Shi Tianhao's refinement. Like the eternal night demon steel given to Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao was still unable to bring out the full power of the Kuanpeng Hall, but just a part of it was already very impressive. With this treasure to protect him, Lin Feng could also be more or less at ease when Shi Tianhao walked outside. Shi Tianhao was overjoyed to obtain the Kuanpeng Hall. He immediately bid farewell to Lin Feng, and returned to his desolate heaven valley to nurture his Yuanying and study the Tao. After forming his nascent soul, He had a deeper understanding of the Tao of the four symbols heaven-opening scripture. He only felt that it really was endless and mysterious. Very soon, the news that Shi Tianhao had formed his Yuanying spread throughout the world, causing an uproar in the entire divine continent. Even the demon race of Tianhuang vast land was affected. Although Shi Tianhao was not the first disciple under Lin Feng to form his nascent soul, the shock he caused was even greater than that of Wang Lin and Zhu Yi. There was no other reason other than the fact that his age advantage was too great, so great that it made people completely dumbfounded. A 13-year-old cultivator of the Yuanying stage was unparalleled in the past and present. Although in the ancient Sky Dragon domain, everyone had a faint premonition that Shi Tianhao, who was at the later stages of the Golden Elixir, would completely soar into the sky after witnessing Shi Tianhao's victory in the final battle. Everyone knew that the Void Thunder tribulation was difficult, and it was not easy to form one's nascent soul. If it was someone else, everyone would think that they might encounter a bottleneck in the formation of their nascent soul, and be unable to take that last step. But for Shi Tianhao, this did not exist at all. If there was a bottleneck that could prevent him from forming his nascent soul, it was undoubtedly the battle with Shi Tianyi. But in this battle, Shi Tianhao had already won. All the past grudges and karma had been personally severed by him, and the last obstacle had also been swept away. In fact, everyone was aware that after this battle, little Shi Tianhao would inevitably form his Yuanying. But speculation and reality were ultimately two different things. When the news of Shi Tianhao forming his nascent soul really came out, it still shocked everyone. Because little Shi Tianhao was really too young. Even if he was a natural-born supreme being, this speed was still too fast. In the cultivation world of the human race, those who could form their nascent soul within 100 years were considered top geniuses. Those who could form their nascent soul within 50 years were even more rare super monsters. There were only a handful of them among the younger generation. Big Shi Tianyi had formed his nascent soul before the age of 17. Which had already shocked the world. But little Shi Tianhao was even more ferocious. At the age of 13 he had formed his Yuanying stage, which suddenly made many people feel that they had lived all their years as a dog. The disciples of the master of the celestial sect of wonders can no longer be described as monsters, they are simply a group of monsters. At this moment, countless people were crying out in grief and indignation. On White Cloud Mountain, the usually calm atmosphere was faintly restless. This restlessness originated from some of the people who had access to the secrets of the Taishu Temple. They clearly knew that although there were many monstrous geniuses in the outside world who had made their names known far and wide, the true top geniuses were still in their Taishu Temple. Among the descendants of the same generation as Yan Mingyue, Pang Jie, and Shi Tianyi, eldest senior brother Lin Daohan had looked down on all ages. He formed his nascent soul at the age of 15, and proved his nascent soul at the age of 36. He was the first person in the history of the human race cultivation world. For those who were familiar with the inside story of the Taishu Temple, as the most dazzling geniuses of the younger generation, Marquis Jinghuan Liang'an and the dual-pupiled Shi Tianyi were indeed worthy of recognition. But they wouldn't feel too shocked. The reason was very simple. There was Lin Daohan suppressing them from above. Whether it was a young genius or a deity descending to the mortal world, in front of the seemingly ordinary green-clothed man, they were truly ordinary. But all of this had come to an end today. A 13-year-old youth had broken Lin Daohan's record of being the youngest to form his nascent soul. In a simple hut in the depths of White Cloud Mountain, the person in question, Lin Daohan, who was dressed in a green robe embroidered with white clouds, was sitting cross-legged with a calm expression. In front of him, there was a flash of light, and Yan Mingyue's appearance appeared. She was currently tilting her head and sizing up her eldest senior brother. She smiled and said, "Eldest senior brother, how does it feel to be surpassed?" Lin Daohan said indifferently, "Records have always been left behind to be broken by others. It's a good thing that each generation is stronger than the last." Yan Mingyue smiled and said, "I feel very satisfied. Ever since I was young, I've watched you surpass everyone else. Us brothers and sisters can only watch as your back gets further and further away. It's rare to see you suffer a setback today. I instantly feel unprecedentedly happy. Hearing Yan Mingyue's teasing, Lin Daohan could not help but laugh and shook his head. Junior sister Yan, you must be joking. After joking, Yan Mingyue's expression gradually turned solemn and she said softly, eldest senior brother, how's the situation in Tianhuang mainland? Lin Daohan answered, the situation has stabilized. He paused for a moment before continuing. In a sense, the outcome of the battle in West Hill City has also affected the development of the situation in Tianhuang mainland. Yan Mingyue nodded and did not say anything else. She thought to herself, Xianmen Tianzong's influence in the human race is indeed growing. Even the demon race is about to be affected. After pondering for a moment, she said slowly, unlike Zhu Yi and Wang Lin's nascent soul formation, although Xianmen Tianzong released the news of Shi Tianhao's nascent soul formation, they did not invite other forces to attend the ceremony. To be honest, Shi Tianhao's nascent soul formation at such a young age is even more worthy of celebration. Lin Daohan said silently, the master of the Mystic Gate should be waiting for his eldest disciple, Xiao Yan. His disciples are indeed all extremely talented, but if we were to break it down, Xiao Zhu, Wang and Shi are undoubtedly the most outstanding. Yan Mingyue revealed a smile. If the master of the Mystic Gate really organizes a large-scale event in the future, will Taishu Temple send people to attend the ceremony? If they don't shut us out, they will naturally go. Lin Daohan's expression was indifferent. No matter what, it's a blessing for the human race that the disciples of the Mystic Gate's master have all grown up. Yan Mingyue looked up at the sky and murmured, indeed. Lin Feng, who was on Lin Daohan and Yan Mingyue's minds, was seriously looking at Xiao Yan who was meditating. He did have plans to hold a large-scale celebration after Xiao Yan's nascent soul formation, but he also had other considerations. Chapter 621. Objectively speaking, although the current Xianmen Tianzong had a grand reputation, it was still top-heavy. To put it harshly, excluding other people in the sect, only Lin Feng himself and his personal disciples were left. In the eyes of the world, there was no difference. In the eyes of most people, Xianmen Tianzong was equal to Lin Feng and his disciples, and Lin Feng and his disciples were equal to Xianmen Tianzong. Such a state was not a normal and optimistic state for a sect that aspired to develop and grow. The height was there, but the foundation was too weak. In a sense, the current Xianmen Tianzong was simply like an inverted pyramid. As a sect, it was not normal no matter how one looked at it. Even Taishu Temple, which took the elite route, gathered geniuses, and endless masters of the primordial spirit level, also had the existence of grassroots and middle level. The current situation was most directly related to the short history of Xianmen Tianzong. The height was already there, but it needed a long time to settle down completely. When Shi Tianhao formed his nascent soul, Lin Feng did not make a big deal. On the one hand, he wanted to wait for Xiao Yan to also form his nascent soul, and on the other hand, he hoped that there would be a period of time for the future disciples of the sect to grow up. In this way, when the time came, he would invite people from all sides to attend the ceremony, which was a real grand momentum. If it was done well, it could even make the overall influence of the sect go up a level. Even though they are intimidated by his strength and prestige, and no one dares to speak out, but Lin Feng knows in his heart that there are countless jealous people who are secretly mocking his sect for being a simple and crude grassroots organization. He himself was famous in the world as the leader, and he could also bring out a few pillars, but there were only a few big cats and small cats under him, which was completely not systematic and of a scale. Later, when the ceremony was done properly, this bad impression could be reversed, and at the same time, it could also play the role of an alliance meeting, so as to further establish his own Xianmen Tianzong as the core of many friendly forces, killing many birds with one stone. 10 minutes on the stage was 10 years of work off the stage. With a plan and goal in mind, Lin Feng had to properly prepare and plan. Of course, he first had to solve the problem of Xiao Yan's nascent soul formation. At this moment, Xiao Yan was sitting cross-legged on the ground. The 4 great fires turned into 4 flaming wings and spread out behind him. The fire was so strong that it covered the sky. 4 flaming wings, 2 on each side, spread out symmetrically. There were 2 flaming wings on his upper shoulders. On the left was a milky white pure yang true fire, and on the right was a bluish-purple netherworld evil flame. There were 2 flaming wings on his lower ribs. On the left was the pure golden true sunfire, and on the right was the golden Nanmingli fire with red and blue light. Xiaoyan closed his eyes. The milky white wings on his left shoulder, which were made of pure yang true fire, suddenly began to twist and decompose, turning into a white sea of fire, floating above Xiaoyan's head. Seeing this, Lin Feng, who was next to him, stretched out his right hand, opened his 5 fingers and grasped in the air. Suddenly, a powerful aura of magic power spread out, covering Xiaoyan's whole body. At the same time, it also faintly controlled the flames around him. Then Lin Feng pointed his left index finger at Xiaoyan. A black line of fire spurted out and fell on Xiaoyan's body. It was the mysterious Heaven Tribulation Flame, which was one of the 7 great fires, along with pure Yang True Fire, Netherworld Evil Flame, True Sunfire, and Nanmingli Fire. Suddenly, the 5 kinds of true fire gathered and blended in Xiaoyan's body. However, everyone did not get along well. Soon there was a fierce conflict. It was like a barrel of gunpowder that was ignited and could explode at any time. If Lin Feng had not helped Xiaoyan with his magic power in advance to stop the true fire, Xiaoyan would have spontaneously combusted and burned to ashes by the true fire he controlled. With his current cultivation of the late stage of golden elixir, controlling 4 kinds of true fire was his limit. To be precise, among the 4 kinds of true fire, one of them must be pure yang true fire. Otherwise, if 4 of the other 6 true fires were chosen, Xiaoyan would not be able to withstand it. 5 kinds of true fire was completely beyond Xiaoyan's ability. Normally, even if he successfully formed his nascent soul and broke through to the early stage of yuanying, he would not be able to control 5 kinds of true fire at will. But right now Lin Feng and Xiaoyan, master and disciple, are trying to break through the norm. Xiaozhen quietly stood at the side, her gaze tightly staring at Xiaoyan who was in the sea of fire. Her pretty face hid a hint of worry, but her emotions were still considered stable. After seeing Lin Feng's monstrous abilities and mana during the Battle of West Hill City, she can still be at ease. However, concern made her confused. Seeing that Xiaoyan was challenging such a difficult challenge, Xiaozhen could not help but worry for him. Watch carefully and feel the changes in power. It will help you understand the Nanmingli fire by analogy. Lin Feng's voice sounded faintly at this time. The ancient emperor's control over the Nanmingli fire can indeed be said to have reached the pinnacle, but the actions that I and my disciple will take next can be considered unprecedented. I believe that it will be of help to you. I can't help but pass on the insights within to your family. Xiaozhen bowed and said, "Thank you for your guidance, senior." Although she said that, she was very polite. Lin Feng was generous enough to let her watch, and she would not tell anyone what she had learned today. Lin Feng nodded his head and did not speak anymore. His and Xiaozhen's gazes once again turned toward Xiaoyan. The white sea of fire formed from the pure yang true fire above Xiaoyan's head continuously churned and surged, while the other 4 great true fires also fell into the white sea of fire under his control. With Lin Feng's magic power, Xiaoyan could control the true fires with his will. In the white sea of fire, the other 4 true fires jumped together and were refined by Xiaoyan's divine sense and magic power. Gradually, to the west of the white sea of fire, a bluish-purple netherworld evil flame continued to gather, and gradually turned into a purple tiger. In the midst of its earth-shaking roar, a piercingly cold murderous aura burst out. The white tiger was in charge of killing. It looked down on the world and killed all living things. After cultivating the 4 divisions Heaven Opening Book, Xiaoyan combined his understanding of the Tao of Heaven and Earth and created the Azure Dragon, Vermilion Bird, White Tiger, and Black Tortoise. Among the 5 types of true flames in his possession, the Netherworld Evil Blaze was the most brutal and tyrannical. Its pure destructive power was the strongest. At this moment, it had condensed into the image of the White Tiger. It complemented each other, and pushed the power of both flames to the extreme. In the south of the White Sea of Fire, there was the Golden Sun True Fire. It was as dazzling as the sun, and it gradually turned into a bird. Its cry shook the 9 heavens as if it wanted to burn everything. This was the vermilion bird that Xiaoyan had formed with the sun true fire. In the north of the White Sea of Fire, the southern Mingli fire, which flashed with red and blue lights, gathered. The red and blue lights gradually separated. The red light was masculine, but it contained calmness. The blue light was feminine, but it was unusually agile. The golden flames gradually separated. One part merged with the red light and turned into a tortoise shape, while the other merged with the blue light and turned into a snake shape. The two sides merged again. Yin and yang merged, and movement and stillness intersected. It contained a mysterious concept of power. It was the black tortoise. And in the east of the White Sea of Fire, there was a profound heaven tribulation flame that looked like a black gas. It was rolling around and trying to swallow everything in its surroundings. It didn't even let the other 4 true fires go. However, with Lin Feng's Dharma power suppressing it and Lin Feng's great sunglass cleansing flame sealing it, the profound heaven tribulation flame couldn't cause any big waves. Xiaoyan calmed down and used his Dharma power and the pure yang true fire to patiently refine the profound heaven tribulation flame. Gradually, the profound heaven tribulation flame that looked like a black gas finally turned into a winding dragon. It moved up and down in the White Sea of Fire, appearing and disappearing. It was strange and unfathomable. After condensing the profound heaven tribulation flame into the azure dragon image, Xiaoyan let out a sigh of relief. He had finally taken the first crucial step. Lin Feng, who was guarding him, also relaxed a lot. At this point he could already confirm that his idea was feasible. Lin Feng wanted to help Xiaoyan control the 5 true fires at the beginning of Yuanying without suffering a backlash. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be. The method was to use the pure yang true fire as the foundation, and use it as the ancestor of all flames to fuse with the other flames to help control the other 4 true fires. Using the mysterious concept of the 4 symbols heaven opening book, one could completely fuse with the true fires and refine them separately. Thus, the true fires could be separated and controlled, not interfering with each other. In a sense, it was a reference to Shi Tianhao's method of using the 4 symbols heaven opening book to refine his 4 chaotic cauldrons. When Xiaoyan first cultivated the 4 symbols heaven opening book, it was from the inside to the outside. Zhu Yi was the same, and Shi Tianhao was from the outside to the inside. Now, with the help of Lin Feng, Xiaoyan was able to combine the 2 methods to reach a higher level. Of course, at this point, Xiaoyan's cultivation was just the beginning. He needed to constantly refine the 4 true fires and maintain a balance, maintaining a perfect state. When he was able to completely control this method, he still had to challenge the void thunder tribulation in this state. This plan that Lin Feng made for Xiaoyan, there are 2 difficult points, and also 2 key points. The journey of 10,000 miles starts with a single step. The first step is to be able to successfully use pure yang true fire as a base, using the 4 great true fires to condense the body of the 4 elephants. The second step was to pass the void thunder tribulation while walking on a tightrope. Right now, Xiaoyan could control the true fires because of Lin Feng's protection. Only after he passed the void thunder tribulation and reached the nascent soul stage could he truly control them with his own cultivation. However, he could not wait until he reached the nascent soul stage to condense the 4 symbols. If he did that, the Dharma power and divine power he obtained would not be pure enough, and could not be completely melted into his own Yuanying. With the help of the nascent soul stage, he could completely perfect the divine power. There was no doubt that this would be a great risk because when he reached the nascent soul stage, Lin Feng could not help. Everything could only be done by Xiaoyan himself. Before that, Xiaoyan at least had to be able to rely on his own ability to hold on for a short period of time. He had to be able to withstand the void thunder tribulation when he reached the nascent soul stage. This required a long period of tempering. During this process, Lin Feng would also always protect him to ensure that he was safe. As time passed, Xiaoyan became more and more proficient in the divine power and Dharma power, and Shi Tianhao had already gone down the mountain to find the last bronze void cauldron. According to the information provided by Yi Longbing of the reincarnation sect, the place was not far from Xianmen Tianzong. It was even within the area of Kunlun Mountain, located at the edge of the southern foothills of Kunlun Mountain. However, a few days later, Shi Tianhao suddenly sent back a piece of news that slightly surprised Lin Feng. Chapter 622. Master, disciple was searching for the last bronze void cauldron. I had already found some clues, but who would have thought that in the southern foothills of Kunlun Mountain, the domain power would suddenly collapse, and a gap would appear in the world barrier. The news that Shi Tianhao sent back was somewhat beyond Lin Feng's expectations. This gap is the entrance to a domain channel. This domain channel leads to a medium-class world, and the bronze void cauldron also fell into the medium-class world along with the void turbulence. Disciple wanted to enter this medium-class world, but I couldn't find the right way. After a brief pause, Shi Tianhao added, although I wasn't able to enter, I was able to roughly observe it from afar. That dimensional realm seems to be barren and uninhabited. It seems to be completely undeveloped, as if it were in a primitive state. After listening to Shi Tianhao's report, Lin Feng's mind turned quickly, and he asked, although separated by the domain channel, I should be able to roughly feel the fluctuations of spiritual energy within. Can you find out the basic situation of this medium-class world? From afar, the degree of spiritual energy can only be considered average, similar to the boundless world and the divine land, suitable for human habitation. Shi Tianhao's voice was a bit annoyed, but also a bit excited. However, looking from afar, I can vaguely see a water marrow crystal mineral deposit exposed on the surface. It looks good, and the reserves are even more amazing. Water marrow crystal was a very valuable mineral in the Great Heaven Primal World. It could be used to refine pills, it could also be used to forge weapons, and it could also help cultivators cultivate. Not only cultivators who cultivated water Dao techniques, but cultivators who cultivated other types of Dao techniques could also use this kind of resource to nourish their own magic power, and cultivate Dao techniques and magical powers. It had a wide range of uses and a large demand, but the quantity was relatively small. After a long period of mining and excavation in the Divine Land, this kind of mineral deposit was already very rare. And a water marrow crystal mineral deposit was a complete mineral deposit of water marrow crystals. As long as the mineral deposit was not excessively mined, then the water marrow crystals in the mineral deposit would constantly regenerate. In the entire boundless universe, water marrow crystals were extremely rare. In a situation where it was nearly impossible to find a complete vein of water marrow crystal, if Shi Tianhao discovered a complete vein of water marrow crystal in this dimensional realm, then that would undoubtedly be shocking news. Once this news spread out, it would cause a great number of people to flock to this place. Moreover, as Shi Tianhao had said, he had only observed from afar through the domain channel. He hadn't truly entered this undeveloped dimensional realm, much less seriously explore it. Besides the water marrow crystal veins, there might be other heavenly materials here. Generally speaking, this was a dimensional realm with great potential for development. No one had set foot here yet. He and Xianmen Tianzong might be the first to set foot on this piece of land. A primitive and barren new world full of limitless potential. After a brief moment of astonishment, Lin Feng was pleasantly surprised. If he could completely occupy this new dimensional realm, then his sect would undoubtedly have a much broader space to develop. He could even accumulate immigrants and develop this world. On one hand, he could obtain more resources, and on the other hand, he could migrate and multiply the population. He could also select materials for his sect in the future, providing a larger population base and a more pure disciple background. If the resource reserves of this dimensional realm were rich enough, then he would have more bargaining chips and benefits in his hands to unite the other sects and closely surround Xianmen Tianzong. In short, there were many benefits. This was a blessing from the heavens that could not be missed. Of course, the early stage of development also required a great deal of energy. After a certain period of accumulation, it would be the harvest season. However, the prerequisite for all of this was that he must be able to truly enter this dimensional realm. This dimensional world has always been in a sealed state before. The realm passageway connecting it to the boundless universe has actually just been born, so it's very unstable. Lin Feng pondered in his heart. But just how vast is the power of the realm? Even if it is unstable, there won't be any large-scale changes. This domain channel should still be in the southern foothills of the Kunlun Mountains. It's just that it's in a state of intermittent existence. Thinking of this, Lin Feng immediately transmitted his voice to Shi Tianhao. Be quiet and stay nearby. Don't run around. There will be others to support you. He flicked his finger, and the purple gas turned into a scroll. Then he stretched out his finger and smeared a few strokes on the scroll, sealing his own spiritual sense and magic power in the scroll. Little E, come to master. In this case, of course, it was necessary to find the most professional person. Zhu Yi came to Lin Feng, somewhat inexplicably. After listening to Lin Feng roughly explain the whole story, he immediately thought of the key point. This dimensional realm, excavating resources and multiplying the population, will be of great help to the development of my Xianmen Tianzong. Lin Feng immediately passed the scroll to him. I need to protect your senior apprentice brother for the time being. You take this scroll and go find Tianhao. Find the location of the dimensional channel entrance to this dimensional world together. Then use this scroll to fix the entrance. Zhu Yi took the scroll and nodded. Don't worry, master. I will take care of it. After sending off Zhu Yi, Lin Feng thought, the southern foothills of the Kunlun Mountains is a little far from Yunfeng Mirror Lake. It's not good for the influence of the sex center. Fortunately, I have Yujing Mountain, so I don't have to worry too much. The only problem I have to be careful of is Shu Mountain. That place is not far from Shu Mountain. Lin Feng's eyes were slightly cold. When the time is right, I really have to go to Shu Mountain. In the system, the creation of the third chapter of the Heavenly Virtue Scripture had actually begun. That was after Lin Feng obtained part of the mystery of the eternal divine light of the immortal Dragon City, through Emperor Qin Shiryu. Through the infinite light Buddha scripture, Lin Feng comprehended the true meaning of light, and through the solitary dark skeleton, he comprehended the true meaning of darkness. Through Yujing Mountain, the eternal light, and the split instant divine sand, Lin Feng comprehended the two extremes of time, the concept of eternal and instant power. Through the pure yang true fire, Lin Feng comprehended the concept of pure yang power, and through the netherworld amethyst, he comprehended the concept of purine power. Through the Yuanshan ancient skin, Lin Feng comprehended the Tao of illusion, and through the illuminating stone he comprehended the Tao of reality. Through the cyclic purple qi, Lin Feng comprehended the meaning of the sky nurturing all living beings, and through the central earth divine light, he comprehended the meaning of the earth bearing the sky. Through the gate of creation and the death energy stone, he comprehended the principle of the impermanence of life and death. Every opposite concept of power was an extremely superior Tao of yin and yang. Combined with the endless changes in the yin and yang life and death formation, Lin Feng finally opened his third chapter of the Heavenly Virtue Scripture, the Yin and Yang chapter. However, there was still a certain distance from the real completion of the Yin and Yang chapter. After the battle in West Hill City, Lin Feng set about the construction of the sect and teaching the disciples, and on the other hand, he had been trying to figure out his own Tao. He vaguely felt that the creation of the Yin and Yang chapter was directly related to his comprehension of the great way of heaven and earth, and his incarnation of the void return. The two complemented each other. When the Yin and Yang chapter was completed, he could step into the void return realm. And when he stepped into the void return realm, it also meant that he had completely comprehended the true meaning of Yin and Yang and perfected the third chapter of the Heavenly Virtue Scripture, the Yin and Yang chapter. There was no contradiction, and there was no priority. The two were one, moving forward together and perfecting together. After Zhu Yi left the mountain and went to the southern foothills of Kunlun Mountain, Lin Feng stayed on Yujing Mountain and continued to look after Xiao Yan, and at the same time he also pondered his own Tao. After some time, there was no news from Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao, but there was good news from Yang Qing on the mountain. Yang Qing did not need Lin Feng's special care, but he still paid some attention to him. At this moment, the purple-clothed youth had a calm expression. Although he still appeared gentle, the childish and weak aura had disappeared. and he looked dignified and steady. He closed his eyes slightly, and the entire flower of 2 poles floated gently on top of his head. The spiritual qi and the concept contained in it were continuously absorbed into Yangqing's body. Lin Feng scanned with his divine sense and noticed that in Yangqing's sea of qi, there was an alchemy cauldron standing on the spiritual platform. In the alchemy cauldron, dark green water and golden flames were intertwined, forming a half-green and half-gold yin and yang tai chi pattern. At this moment, this golden-green yin and yang tai chi pattern was constantly rotating, supporting a golden elixir shadow, rising and falling in the alchemy cauldron, and clouds of purple mist kept rolling. After a long time, the golden-green yin and yang tai chi pattern shone brightly, and its whole body shrank, merging into the golden elixir shadow. The shadow of the golden core suddenly fell, and the golden light that was flashing suddenly turned purple at this moment. Amidst the purple light, the golden elixir shadow, which was originally a shadow, finally condensed into a solid body, revealing an immortal metal attribute and eternal power concept. Yangqing finally succeeded in forming the golden elixir. And Lin Feng's eyes focused, and when he looked carefully, he saw that inside Yangqing's golden elixir, which was flashing with purple light, was half gold and half green. Like golden needles, the Sun True Fire's divine light gathered together and burned fiercely, and opposite it was the dark green and gentle lunar true water. The 2 powers, one yin and one yang, blended together without any disharmony. Instead, they promoted each other and turned into an incomparably perfect balance of yin and yang, forming a yin and yang tai chi pattern, which circulated in Yangqing's golden elixir. The purple elixir gave birth to a phenomenon. When Lin Feng saw this scene, he clapped his hands and smiled. Yangqing was Yangqing after all. Both of them had reached 9 points of root bone and comprehension, and it was really not a boast. Of course, the road was long and long. Passing the core formation stage did not mean that there would be no other problems in the future. Yangqing's willpower was still on the low side. The golden elixir had 3 tribulations, and each one was a challenge for him that risked his life. However, Lin Feng was already mentally prepared for this. He would take care of the growth of every personal disciple. Back then, he was able to cultivate Wang Lin, who was struggling to move forward. Now he was also confident that he could also cultivate Yangqing. Especially when Yangqing was not a rotten wood that was hard to carve. Lin Feng was even more confident. Yangqing opened his eyes and let out a long breath. His eyes were full of joy, but when he saw the smile on Lin Feng's face, he suddenly felt a little sour in his nose. Slowly he bowed towards Lin Feng. Everything was silent. Lin Feng smiled. He raised his hand and lifted Yangqing up. At this time, Lin Feng's heart suddenly stirred. It turned out that Zhui had sent back a message. Master, this disciple and junior apprentice brother have found the dimensional channel that leads to the dimensional realm, and we have used Master's decree to stabilize it. Zhui paused for a moment and then said, Junior apprentice brother is not mistaken. It is indeed a brand new dimensional realm that no one has ever set foot in before. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.